Chapter 536. Xiao Xian and the others chose to use the most direct hunting method to intimidate this group of people. Didn't this group of people think that the Yinjiao people were barbaric and violent? Then let them see how barbaric and violent they were, and let them know that once they entered the forest, they shouldn't think too much and be obedient. On the 5th day of entering the forest, a group of more than 60 people walked in the forest. The initial discomfort had passed, and now these tribes from the central plains or the grasslands had begun to understand some of the most basic survival skills in this forest. Above the crisscrossing net of vines, a huge face that was close to 2 meters tall suddenly appeared. 2 pitch-black eyes seemed to be looking in the direction of the team. The whole face was distorted in a somewhat strange way, and it was dyed with a terrifying coldness by the different colors. At first, when they saw this face, many people in the group were frightened and almost attacked. Fortunately, Xiao Xian and the others stopped them in time. Otherwise, everyone would have suffered. But now, seeing this face again, other people in the group felt a little uncomfortable, but they were able to deal with it calmly. The Yinjiao people were right. Sometimes, things that seemed scary on the surface were actually not. Moreover, most of the time they were listed as objects to be ignored. After the group had all passed through here, the face that suddenly appeared on the net of interwoven vines gradually changed color, like a canvas washed with detergent. Moreover, it folded up and both sides began to fold at the same time. After a short while, a strangely striped butterfly flew out of the net of vines and flew towards a darker place where the vines were denser and where Yang Guang could barely be seen. This was actually a kind of butterfly in the fearsome beast mountain forest. They usually liked to rest on the net of interwoven vines, but when they rested, they usually raised their wings. Only when they sensed unfamiliar people or danger would they suddenly open their wings and flatten them, using the patterns on their wings to scare away people or beasts. If someone attacked it, it would shake its wings, shaking off the powder on its wings that could make people sneeze. Even some of the larger fearsome beasts would sneeze for nearly an hour if they inhaled this powder. After walking for a while, they found a place to rest. Along the way they had already experienced too much. Originally, they were dissatisfied because the Flaming Horn tribe asked for too much sincerity, but now their dissatisfaction disappeared completely. At the same time, they were also glad that they chose to give sincerity instead of entering the mountain themselves like the Tianshan tribe. He didn't know how the Tianshan tribe was doing now, but he didn't think it would be any better. There were some small flying insects around them. The Yinjiao people said that they didn't need to pay attention to these small flying insects, so everyone let down their guard and paid more attention to their surroundings. Over the past few days, their clothes, regardless of whether they were made of linen or silk, were stained with sweat, blood of beasts, and mud that masked the smell of grass and other things that were stuck to their bodies. Because there was no time to wash, the temperature in the forest was still high, and everyone was emitting a stench. But even so, they had no choice because all kinds of beasts in the forest were very sensitive to strange smells and blood. Although they all had a strange smell on them, at least they could hide and not be discovered when they encountered fearsome beasts that they didn't want to face. There were many flying insects the size of sesame seeds around them. They probably smelled the smell on them and didn't disperse for a long time. Instead, more and more of them gathered. "Is this where you usually hunt?" Chu Su raised his hand and waved away the flying insects. "Yeah." Xiao Xian replied simply as he chewed on the leftover meat that he had roasted yesterday. The Hui tribe was fine, but for the Mang 8 limbs and other tribes that focused on farming, it was hard for them to understand why the Yinjiao people often ran into the dangerous forest to hunt. Moreover, they ran so far. They had been walking for several days, but they still hadn't left the Yinjiao hunting range. After the Yinjiao tribe came to the old haunt, they opened up 2 hunting routes and this was one of them. After eating the meat, Xiao Xian stood up and looked into the distance. The terrain here wasn't high, but fortunately there weren't too many trees so they could see further. There was a stream not far away and they had just gotten water from there. For the Yinjiao people, drinking directly was no problem. They were used to it anyway and their bodies could withstand it. But for the other tribes, drinking the water here could cause diarrhea. Xiao Xian told them to boil the water before drinking. Xiao Xian was about to discuss the next step with Duo Kong and Mai when his ears twitched. His eyes flashed and his right foot moved back half a step, and his right arm suddenly stretched out. Whoosh! Chu Su and the others, who were not far away, only saw the shadow of a hand flash by. When they looked again, Xiao Xian was already holding something in his hand. "This is..." A few people nearby also came over to take a look. It was their first time coming to a place like this, and they still had a lot to learn from the Yinjiao people. Although they didn't like the Yinjiao people's way of doing things, they had to admit that they were far behind the Yinjiao people when it came to survival experience in the fearsome beast forest. So, if they didn't understand, they had to be thick-skinned and ask. Only when they understood could they avoid unnecessary danger and trouble. Mosquitoes, the kind that suck blood. Xiao Xian frowned. He clenched his fist and carefully moved his index finger and thumb away. The thing in Xiao Xian's hand was still struggling. A thin needle, that was longer than Xiao Xian's pinky finger, stretched out and wriggled. Xiao Xian accurately pressed his thumb on the thin needle and exerted force with his fingers. There was only a slight bang sound, as if something hard had been broken. Although the sound wasn't loud and there were even various bird calls from the forest in the distance, it wasn't hard for the people present not to hear it. Seeing this scene, Chu Su and the others' facial muscles twitched violently. What was that bang sound just now? Was that a mosquito's mouth? Why did it sound like a hard needle? Did this thing suck blood too? Are you kidding me? What would it feel like to be stung by it? Xiao Xian opened his clenched fist and handed the dead mosquito to Chu Su and the others to study. Just now, he had broken the thin needle that was wriggling like a syringe, which was the mosquito's sucking mouthpart. With its mouthpart broken and being pinched half to death by Xiao Xian, the mosquito had long lost its ability to move and would not live for long. Xiao Xian handed the intact mosquito corpse to Chu Su and the others so that they could take a good look at this unnoticeable but extremely dangerous creature in the forest. It would also make it easier for him to take action. Chu Su picked up the mosquito corpse and looked at it. Although there were also very powerful mosquitoes where they lived and could suck people dry, compared to this one in front of them, the danger level was not as high. Ignoring the people studying the mosquito, Xiao Xian said to Mai and the others, "Something's wrong." Although the group of people were studying the mosquitoes in the forest, they also pricked up their ears and paid attention to Xiao Xian's words. After hearing Xiao Xian's words, they hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" They shouldn't have appeared at this time. Xiao Xian wiped the sweat from his forehead. Does this weather look like winter? No one refuted that it was summer. It was so strange, even more serious than last year. Everyone felt uneasy, especially when they were told by the tribe's shaman that there might be unpredictable changes. They were especially worried. In this weather, mosquitoes like this will definitely appear in swarms. Xiao Xian said. Swarms? Looking at the dead mosquito and thinking about the mosquito swarms that might appear, the group of people could not help but shiver. Swarms of mosquitoes will appear during the day? Someone asked. What do you think? Xiao Xian looked at the mosquito and then glanced at the forest that was blocked by Yangguang. Then what should we do? Someone was anxious. Of course there is a way. You need to apply something, but it might be a little uncomfortable. Just bear with it. You can avoid those mosquitoes after applying it. Listen to me. Xiao Xian said and signaled to Tua. Tua nodded and then left with Mai. When they reappeared, they had already wrapped some black mud with big leaves with a strange stench. Looking at the black mud handed over by the Yanjiao people, the faces of the people of several tribes darkened. Where did they dig this out of? What the hell is this? Where did you dig it out from? Do we really have to apply it? Huang Ye's voice was hoarse. Are you kidding us? It's up to you. We're just showing you the way. Xiao Xian said indifferently. Then why don't you apply it? Someone argued. Xiao Xian and the other 4 people rolled up their sleeves, revealing the lines drawn with paint from their shoulders to their fingers on their arms. We applied it before we came out. We applied it with a mixture of herbs and paint. This is our Yinjiao habit. But we didn't expect that there would be swarms of mosquitoes at this time. We didn't bring much medicine, so you have to make do with this mud. Huang Yi and the others' faces darkened even more. However, for the sake of safety, he endured it and used broken branches to smear the black mud on his body. The smell was so strong that it almost made him tear up. However, at dusk, they knew that Xiao Xian really didn't lie to them, and their resentment subsided a little. In the forest ahead, buzzing sounds echoed. Even if they didn't go there, they knew the possible situation over there. They couldn't tell how many mosquitoes there were just by the sound. Let's keep going. There's still some distance to the place where we'll rest tonight. The Yanjiao leading the way didn't stop, so the people behind had to keep up. The buzzing sounds in their ears were getting louder and louder. They could clearly hear the flapping of the mosquitoes' wings as they flew by, stimulating everyone's eardrums. Everyone's tense nerves jumped. Although the light was dim, with their eyesight they could still see the needle-like mouths on the mosquitoes. There were too many of them. The mosquito swarms in front of them were almost all over the forest. From the ground to the branches above, they were all flying mosquitoes. They all blocked their sight. However, every time a mosquito flew by, it would avoid the people walking over and wouldn't jump up to bite them. Everyone's hanging hearts gradually relaxed. The breath they had been holding in was also slowly released. I told you we're right to listen to us. Xiao Xian, who was leading the way in front, said. Chapter 537. The team rested in the cave they had planned for the night. They had found this cave when they were hunting, but it was too small to store bigger prey. After comparing a few places, Yanjiao's hunting team chose another place as their resting point, and this one was used as a backup. Xiao Xian and the others would not take these people to the resting place of their own hunting team. They could only come here or they could sleep in the open. Only idiots would lead these people to their own secret base. Xiao Xian did not trust these people. They set up the firewood and boiled some water in a stone pot they made temporarily. Then they boiled a pot of soup and roasted some meat. In the forest outside the cave, there were some squeaking noises echoing in the air. He didn't know what it was, but it sounded creepy. The mud on their bodies had already coagulated, but they did not dare to take it off because they did not know if they would encounter more mosquito swarms later. Fortunately, the smell of the black mud had faded a little after it had coagulated. Even if it had not faded, they felt that it was bearable now. As the saying goes, one does not know how bad it is after smelling it for a long time. At first, some people were worried that Xiao Xian was playing a prank on them by giving them some mud with feces. Later they found out that the black mud came from some pits near the stream, because there was a kind of animal that liked to eat mosquitoes living in those pits. Therefore, mosquitoes were disgusted by the smell of the black mud, and would automatically avoid it when they smelled it. After knowing the truth, they felt a lot calmer. But what they did not know was that many animals that went to drink water in the pits where the black mud was produced would also be dragged into those pits. Although the Yanjiao people looked serious, they were actually laughing in their hearts. What is that? Chu Si said, pointing at the foot of the mountain. Xiao Xian looked down the mountain. In the dark, there were some shining curves in the forest, winding to the distance. There was a small river there, and those shining things were actually some small creatures living by the river. At night, they would float from the bottom of the river and gather near the river bank. The light they emitted would attract some animals that were attracted to the light. When those animals touched the water, they would find that they were glued to the water and unable to break free. In the end, they would be dragged into the water and eaten. Don't go there. They will eat you, Xiao Xian said. Not every place that glowed was a channel that produced gems. Some places were absolutely dangerous, especially in a mountain forest like this. On the 15th day in the forest, the team had already left Yanjiao's hunting area and entered the heart of the fearsome beast forest. They had to be more careful as they went forward, because the 5 Yanjiao people did not have much to guide them. No one knew what would be in front of them. The team slowed down. Xiao Xian, Duo Kong, Mai and the other 4 gathered together. It looked like they were discussing something, but in reality the other 4 were covering for Xiao Xian. They had seen too many Yanjiao people like this over the past few days, so they were already used to it. Therefore, the people from the other 6 tribes did not pay much attention to it and gathered together to discuss. In a place where no one could see, Xiao Xian was quickly tying a knot on a straw rope in his hand. When Xiao Xian opened his eyes and looked at the rope that was finally tied, he read the hints given by the knots. Xiao Xian pointed in a direction. Over there. The Yanjiao people had just finished discussing the direction when they heard a slightly arrogant voice say, "This old man has observed the weather and predicted that there will be rain tomorrow. At the latest, it will be the day after tomorrow and it will not be light. It may even last for 2 to 3 days. How do you plan to deal with it?" Xiao Xian looked at the person who spoke. It was an elder of the Longboat tribe named Muyu. Along the way he had heard him talk about observing the weather several times. The day before yesterday he had even said that there would be no rain in 3 days. In fact, ever since they entered the forest it had not really rained. Even if it did, it was just a small dot. Most of the time it was sunny and the temperature was getting higher. Looking at the other tribesmen, they seemed to believe Muyu's words. The 4 Yanjiao people glanced at the old man who was sitting there pretending to be deep in thought, then looked at Xiao Xian. They did not believe anyone but Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian shook his head. The arrogance on Muyu's face became even more obvious. He felt that when it came to observing the weather, no one here could compare to him. Perhaps the Yanjiao shamans had similar abilities, but that was different. The shamans used shaman power, while he relied on his rich personal experience. Moreover, there was no shaman here. The Longboat tribe spent most of the year on boats, traveling along the river, so they were more knowledgeable. Observing the weather was a skill that many crew members had to learn. They could judge the weather early, and they could also prepare in advance to reduce losses. Finally, they had a chance to show off their strengths. The Longboat tribe also felt a sense of relief. No matter how good the Yanjiao people's survival skills were in the fearsome beast forest, They could not judge the weather a few days in advance, right? These days they had not heard them talk about it. At most, they could predict the next day's weather from the evening or night sky. They also thought that Xiao Xian's action of shaking his head meant that he did not know the weather. The other tribes were discussing finding a place to take shelter from the rain in advance. They were prepared to hide for 2 or 3 days. They did not want to walk in the rain in this forest. The 4 Yinjiao people knew that when Xiao Xian shook his head, he was actually saying, "Don't listen to his nonsense. There was no rain. Continue in the direction of the divination." Therefore, from the moment they entered the forest until now, this was the first time they had such a big disagreement. Yinjiao wanted to continue in the direction they had decided, while the other 6 tribes were more inclined to the Longboat tribe's decision. They wanted to find a place to take shelter from the rain first. Well, Xiao Xian was not angry. He said in a calm tone, "This place is beyond the range we are familiar with. We have done our duty of leading the way. If you have other decisions we will not object. But we will still follow our own plan." "Wait, we will go with you," Gula hurriedly said. Since the Hui tribe had cooperated with Yinjiao and chosen the Yinjiao side, they should not betray them at this time. Moreover, Gula also felt that it was better to follow the Yinjiao. At worst they would get wet in the rain. But the eagles in the sky would suffer. They did not like to get wet in the rain. The people of the Mang tribe looked at each other. Chusi said, "Then let's go together. The Mang tribe is not familiar with the forest. We hope that the Yinjiao brothers can help us." Huang Yi, the leader of the Mang tribe, did not say anything, which meant that he agreed with Chusi's decision. Although he felt that Muyu was right, at the same time after 10 days of observation he felt that the Yinjiao people's beast-like intuition was very rare and worth studying. Just as Chusi said, in this forest, it was better to observe how the Yinjiao people acted. The people of the 8 Limbs tribe looked at each other. But since the people of the Mang tribe were on their side, they could not stay on the Longboat tribe's side. It was better to cooperate with the Mang tribe. The people of the 1,000 Masked tribe did not say anything. They took big steps towards the Yinjiao side, which made Muyu's eyebrows twitch. Seeing this situation, the Feather tribe's determination to stand on the Longboat side was shaken. "No, it's over. There are only a few of us here. We will definitely be at a disadvantage." So Guji, the leader of the Feather tribe, sighed. He smiled apologetically to Muyu and led his people to stand on the Yinjiao side. The people of the Longboat tribe. How could they choose in this situation? Anyway, they would definitely not choose to be alone. So Muyu, with a pale face, continued to follow the Yinjiao side with the others. "Why did you choose this direction?" Huang Yi asked Xiao Xian. "Because I think we can find the slaves of Rock Hill City here," Xiao Xian said. Behind him Muyu snorted. His voice was neither soft nor loud, but it could be heard. Xiao Xian's face did not change at all, as if he did not hear the sarcastic snort. He led his people and continued to walk. The next day, blue sky, white clouds, and scorching sun. It did not look like it was going to rain. Muyu's face became uncomfortable. On the 3rd day, the sun was shining in the sky. The scorching sun was still scorching the earth. Muyu was quite uncomfortable. He kept his eyelids down and did not look at anyone. The people of the Longboat tribe did not say anything. They pretended to be dumb. On the 4th day it still did not look like it was going to rain. However, no one was in the mood to make fun of Muyu. After entering the heart of the fearsome Beast Mountain forest, the sense of crisis was even stronger. They did not want to be distracted. What Xiao Xian did not explain was that the weather in the fearsome Beast Mountain forest changed too quickly. The closer they got to the heart of the forest, the more unpredictable it was. If Yang Sui of the Rain tribe was here, he might be able to make some predictions in advance. The people of the Longboat tribe? Forget it. Their experience was accumulated under normal circumstances. It might not be applicable here. Moreover, Xiao Xian felt that the weather was getting hotter and hotter. It was already out of the ordinary and unpredictable. Even if Xiao Xian learned to observe the sky from others, he could not accurately predict the weather unless he used not divination. Xiao Xian would not say these explanations. He would not give Muyu a way out. Who asked him to be so arrogant before? In the forest, the insects hiding among the leaves were noisy. Xian Mai, who came down from the tree, pointed in a direction with a serious look. Xiao Xian jumped up the tree and looked in the direction Mai pointed. Not far ahead, there were some gray figures flying among the verdant green. "What's wrong?" Gula asked. "Let's go ahead and take a look." Those gray figures were a type of scavenger bird. When Xiao Xian arrived, the ground was almost covered in a layer of gray. Sensing people coming over, the gray figures shouted and flew into the sky in flocks. The layer of gray that originally covered the ground was also removed. There were the bones of a fearsome beast on the ground as well as a few human bones. Whether it was the humans or the fearsome beast, their original appearance could no longer be seen. Less than 1/5 of their bodies were eaten. There was a broken spear stuck in one of the bones. The spearhead was made of metal and not stone. It's those slaves? Seeing this, the people of several tribes were delighted. The flaming horns were right. As they walked in this direction, they actually found the group of slaves sent by Rock Hill City. Chapter 538. There were many broken branches around them. The branches and leaves that blocked the sky above were scattered on the ground, revealing an empty space where Yang could shine directly on the ground. Under the hot weather and scorching sun, the smell of rotting meat spread everywhere, attracting many scavengers. However, they didn't know if it was because a huge beast had been angered here not long ago. Other than the group of gray-feathered scavenger birds and some small flying insects, they didn't see any larger animals. After looking around and finding the tracks they were looking for, the team set off again. Since they had already found the tracks of the slaves sent by Rock Hill City, it was much easier to follow the tracks. After all, there were many slaves. It was said that Rock Hill City sent 500 people this time. Compared to the entire tribe or Rock Hill City, it wasn't a lot. However, to send 500 people all the way from the desert and into the fearsome beast forest was a big deal. Now Xiao Xian's team only had 50 to 60 people. After finding the tracks of the slaves, the others no longer doubted the words of the Yanjiao people. In their hearts, they were glad that they chose to follow Yanjiao. Otherwise, if they had to look for a team of 500 people in such a large forest, they might not be able to find it even after 100 days. Many of the tracks couldn't be maintained for too long. The self-healing speed of the forest here was much faster than people thought. Even the corpses they saw were almost eaten up. Tomorrow there wouldn't even be a bone left. Because the team entered the forest much later than the slaves, the tracks left by the slaves were mostly covered by the self-healing of the forest, so they didn't know where the slaves went in the beginning. Thinking about it this way, the tribes felt that the sincerity they paid to Yanjiao was quite worth it. It was much harder to find a satisfactory place to rest if they were out of Yanjiao's familiar range. There were more hidden dangers in the forest and they were more hidden. It was impossible to guard against them. Following the trail left behind by the slave caravan for 4 days, 5 out of the 63 people in the caravan were now missing. They had lost their lives due to various reasons along the way. This morning, a member of the Longboat tribe was poisoned to death by a poisonous snake. They didn't even have time to rescue him. That person was bitten on the neck. Before anyone could check on his injuries, his entire neck turned black rapidly, as if it had been dyed with ink. It even started to fester. The person who was bitten died not long after. That was an intermediate totem warrior. His body was resistant to poison, but he didn't last long. In the end, he couldn't even say a word. The venomous snake that had bitten people was lying in ambush on the tree. It was silent, like a dead thing that had clung to the tree. It seemed to have merged with the tree and would only attack when people passed by. In the past, the people of the Longboat tribe thought that large snakes were generally not poisonous, unless they were ferocious beasts. But here, there were many kinds of large poisonous snakes and they were all highly venomous. Just like the one that had bitten their companions, it was thicker than a person and extremely poisonous. After its head was cut off, it almost bit another person. If the Yanjiao people hadn't acted fast enough, the Longboat tribe would have lost 2 people. Don't think that these things are harmless just because their heads are cut off. Be careful or it'll be too late to cry. Xiao Xian said to those people. Because he had been to forests like this before. Before the Yanjiao tribes migrated to the old haunt, many of the hunting teams had passed through forests like this. Especially the advanced group, it was no less difficult than here. Therefore, even though it was the first time Mai and Tua came here, they were able to adapt quickly. It was their first time here, so they weren't familiar with the terrain. They couldn't find a cave for them to rest in, so they had to sleep in the open most of the time. 2 days ago, when they were looking for a place to rest, they spent the night in the open air on a mountain. They didn't find a cave, so they rested in a leeward place near the mountainside. The slave teams that had passed by here before should have also rested here, leaving behind traces of activity. There were some carvings on the mountain wall. With Xiao Xian's understanding of stone, many of the carvings on the mountain wall weren't made in a short period of time. Some of them should have been made a long time ago. This also proved that there were slave teams that had been sent here before. Finding traces of slave activity also confirmed Xiao Xian's guess. The people from Rock Hill City had definitely caught the green-faced fanged beast. Along the way they saw some slave corpses from time to time. Some were already gnawed beyond recognition and some were mutilated. In a place like this, humans were the prey. At noon, 2 people from the 8 Limbs tribe went to the river to get water. However, they didn't go too close to the river. The day before yesterday, one of their people was dragged into the river because he was too close. He didn't even see what was dragging him. The weather was getting hotter and it was very tiring for them to travel. They were sweating all over. Walking in the forest, although the branches and leaves above blocked most of the Yangguang, everyone could feel the higher the temperature and the stronger the need for water. A thin wire was tied to a hard shell that looked similar to a coconut. The round shell had a hole half the size of a fist dug out. A stone was tied to the shell, and then the shell and the stone were thrown into the river 20 meters away. With a thud, the round shell was pulled down by the stones tied to it. The river water poured into the round shell from the hole dug out. When they felt that it was enough, the 2 warriors of 8 Limbs suddenly pulled the strings in their hands, trying to pull back the round shell that had been filled with water. As soon as the water-filled shell emerged from the water and was pulled into the air, a 2-meter-long figure suddenly jumped out of the river and bit the shell that was pulled into the air. Then the shell fell back into the water, causing the water to splash everywhere. The 2 warriors who were fetching water could still clearly hear the cracking sound of the round shell that was filled with water breaking. However, they had seen similar situations several times. After a slight surprise, they calmly took out the same round shell again and threw it into the river. This time they were not bitten and the water was successfully fetched. Next time we can change it to a more solid silk. We can still fish. Xiao Xian looked at the still turbulent river and said, "The figure that jumped up just now looked like a lizard without legs. It should be a kind of fish in the river." The warrior from the 8 Limbs tribe thought for a while and agreed. If it was a solid wire, if it was bitten while fetching water, it could drag out the things in the water. Maybe it could solve the problem of food at night. He couldn't drag it out by himself, so he asked the Yinjiao people for help. The Yinjiao people were strong. The 8 Limbs tribe was rich in spider silk. Different species of spiders produced different kinds of spider silk. After processing, some silk was soft enough to weave clothes and some was stronger but harder, suitable for weaving nets, setting traps and catching prey. For the young people in the team, this was a rare experience, far better than the one in the desert. They not only had to follow the traces of the slaves, but also had to solve the problems of food and water. Sometimes they even had to fight with the bear for a cave. In the ferocious beast mountain forest at night, the cave was much safer. When they were looking for a place to rest for the night, they encountered a situation of fighting for a cave, but they didn't win that time. The giant bear was too smart and it didn't come out at all. No matter how they provoked it, it just stayed in the cave and guarded that place. If the giant bear was lured out of the cave, they could cooperate to deal with it or even turn it into their dinner. But if the bear didn't come out, it was difficult. The people outside couldn't rush in, and the bear in the cave made full use of the terrain to defend. The people in the team took turns to attack it, but they still couldn't lure it out. Chu Su and the others were roared at by the giant bear. The giant bear must have eaten fish, because its saliva still had a strong fishy smell. Now Chu Su was walking with the fishy smell all over his body. However, they didn't know if it was the effect of the giant bear's saliva, but there were several times when the people in the team were ambushed by beasts, but none of them attacked Chu Su. This was another kind of luck for him. Another half a day passed and when the team went over a mountain, they stopped halfway up and planned to rest. "What's wrong?" Seeing Xiao Xian standing on a rock and looking into the distance, Duo Kong and the others came over and asked. Xiao Xian pointed to the front. "Did you notice anything different?" "Different?" Duo Kong and the others looked in that direction. "There are many mountains. Not only that, the leaves in that place are very different," Xiao Xian pointed out. "Now that you mention it, I think so too. The leaves there look soft and tender." Duo Kong touched his chin and reached out to pluck a leaf from a shrub next to him to take a look. Perhaps it was because the weather was too hot and there was no rain for a long time, but many of the plants here looked a little withered. The leaves on the branches a little further away from the trunk looked very listless. However, when he looked in that direction again, although he couldn't see what kind of plants were growing on the mountain due to the distance, the emerald greenery there was indeed very eye-catching. Even the slanted sunlight couldn't dim them, especially in such a hot climate. The greenery there was so tender and fresh that water could be squeezed out with a little pinch. It was very refreshing. "Hey look, there's smoke over there," Mai said. Mai's voice also attracted the others in the team to gather and look in front. Among the towering mountains in the lush green field of vision, some gray smoke was rising from the mountain forest over there. However, because of the wind, it was blown away as soon as it came out. It's that group of slaves. It must be them. We've finally caught up. The people in the team were excited. Xiao Xian looked at the mountain over there and said, maybe what they're looking for is in the mountain forest in front of us. The team was silent, and more than 50 pairs of eyes looked at Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian means that it's here? Huang Yi asked. Along the way they had seen a lot. Their attitude towards the Yinjiao people had also changed significantly, especially Xiao Xian, who played a role in decision-making. When Huang Yi and the others spoke, they would use the word elder, which was also a kind of recognition. However, Xiao Xian didn't care about this. He didn't care whether others recognized him or not. At this moment, Xiao Xian looked at the mountain forest in front of him, thinking about the information about the green-faced fanged beast. There were many mountains in front of him, so there should be more water. At first glance, it gave people a sense of tranquility. In the fearsome beast mountain forest, it could be considered a special area. The green-faced fanged beast could really be there. Chapter 539. In the middle of the mountains, the sound of people shouting could be heard from the wooden houses that were built. These wooden houses were built recently. The broken parts of the wood were relatively new. The wooden houses were arranged here, and it looked like a mountain village that lived in seclusion in this uninhabited place. Thick wooden pillars more than 10 meters tall had been erected around the perimeter, forming a wall that blocked some of the smaller wild beasts outside. On top of the tall tower there were 3 slaves with tan skin. They were standing there and looking in 3 different directions. In the open space, huge beast bones were thrown there. The bones were so white that there was not a trace of flesh left. They had been disassembled to the point that their original appearance could not be seen. Only the eye holes and nostrils above let people know that this was the head of a giant beast. The bones, horns, and teeth that were suitable for polishing weapons had been dismantled. The sound of polishing bones and horns could be heard everywhere. Although most of the weapons they brought out were metal weapons, they had consumed a lot. The conditions here were limited. They could only repair some of the metal weapons that were not seriously damaged. Those beyond the repair range could only be put aside. Without weapons they could not survive in this place full of fierce beasts and dangers. Compared to stone tools, bones, horns, teeth, and so on were more convenient. The slaves in charge of polishing were running back and forth with a variety of tools. They seemed very busy. Compared to other people's movements, there was a small open space in the middle of the wooden houses. No one dared to run around here, let alone shout loudly. There was a bonfire in the middle of the clearing. Pieces of beast bones with meat were being roasted there. Fat dripped into the bonfire, making sizzling sounds. A middle-aged man who was relatively fair sat beside the bonfire. The other slaves were either wearing tattered sackcloth or wrapped in blood-stained animal skins, but this middle-aged man was wearing very clean clothes. It was also linen, but the cloth on his body was woven more carefully. The texture was obviously different from the others. There were some scratches at the corners of his clothes, but there were no holes at all. At this time, the middle-aged man was frowning, looking at a drawn animal skin roll in his hand. There were some simple drawings on the animal skin scroll. The dark green triangular shapes were mountains, and the shapeless large green areas were forests in other places. Among these green areas, there was a sandy yellow line passing through them and finally ending at one place. It was a simple map. The line on the map was the route their team had taken. One end of the line was where they had entered the forest, and the other end was where they were now. After making sure that he had not gone the wrong way, the middle-aged man's brows furrowed even deeper. Several senior slaves standing next to him bowed their heads and only used their peripheral vision to carefully pay attention to the person sitting on the stone and looking at the map. They knew that the other party was in a bad mood, so they didn't dare to say anything, for fear that they would say something wrong and cause the anger of this person. "It's here. There's no mistake," the middle-aged man sitting on the rock murmured. Because of the fluctuation of his emotions, his feet stomped on the ground, creating a foot-sized hole in the weeds under his feet. The slave standing next to him lowered his head even more. The smell of meat permeated the mountain stronghold. The slaves who were guarding or busy in various places sniffed fiercely. The smell of meat made them obsessed and stimulated the secretion of saliva. However, even if they wanted to look over there, they still resisted the urge to turn their heads and stared at the work in progress in their hands. They didn't dare to look around. At this time, there was movement at the entrance of the mountain stronghold. A team of 20 people came back from the outside, either carrying or dragging small prey. The middle-aged man who was staring at the map suddenly looked up. The team who had just entered the temporary mountain stronghold saw the other party, and their eyes were averted. They didn't dare to look at the other party directly. The middle-aged man holding the animal skin roll had a flash of expectation in his eyes. Soon it dimmed and was followed by a rapid rise in anger. Still can't find it? How can it be? Why can't I find it? The middle-aged man, whose eyes were red with anger, shook his arm and wanted to smash the animal skin roll in his hand to the ground. But the moment before it fell, he paused and kicked it vigorously. The animal skin roll couldn't be thrown away. It was an important guide for their operation. But he couldn't vent his anger. He was unhappy and could only kick the grass on the ground. The grass that was higher than his knees was kicked to pieces. If you can't find the green-faced fanged beast, why are you venting your anger on grass? A lazy voice was heard. The middle-aged man holding the animal skin roll heard this voice and the corner of his eye twitched. He didn't look in that direction. He turned his head and shouted at the slaves who were standing next to him, "Keep looking for it. If you can't find it, you don't have to go back." When they heard that they couldn't go back, the group of slaves wailed in their hearts. They didn't dare to delay. Those who came back before this hurriedly ate something and set off again. The slaves who were polishing the horns and bones moved even faster. For many people, the desert was a land of death. It was dry and windy, and it was rare to see a bit of green. It was so desolate that people would avoid hearing about it. But for these slaves, even if the food in the desert couldn't be compared to the forest full of trees and beasts, they were already used to it. Many of the people in the group had been slaves for generations. Servility was engraved in their bones. Other than being slaves, they didn't know what else to do. Moreover, in these people's eyes, Rock Hill City was their home. It was the place they were loyal to. It was also their belief. If they couldn't go back, it was the same as asking for their lives. Now that Rock Hill City was the overlord of the desert, the slaves of Rock Hill City shared the glory and became even more loyal to Rock Hill City. The people who were sent out were all loyal to Rock Hill City, so there was no need to worry about their betrayal. Of the 500 people who came out, more than 100 died or were injured because of various dangers in the forest. Fortunately, they found this place. Unfortunately, the place marked on the map was the destination. They searched for a few days and still couldn't find the target. The middle-aged man returned to the fire and sat on a rock to sulk. He was too embarrassed to go back if he couldn't find the green-faced fanged beast. But there was no other way. Was he supposed to turn the mountains upside down to look for it? After taking a few deep breaths, the middle-aged man couldn't help but ask, "Robber 4, how's your side?" Didn't find it. These 3 words were just like this person's attitude. He was completely indifferent. He was not in a hurry and was very comfortable as if he was playing. He seemed to be enjoying it. Then why aren't you looking for it? The middle-aged man squeezed the words out from between his teeth. He really didn't understand why Shu wanted to find the robbers. What else could they do other than steal? Robber 4 slowly walked to the fire and sat down. He picked up the nicely roasted ribs and started eating without caring about the heat. As he ate, he mumbled, "If it was so easy to find, you people from Rock Hill City wouldn't have only found 3 in a few hundred years." "Oh right, sure. Robber 4 suddenly remembered something and said, "There are tribesmen following us." To Robber 4 the robbers were different. They weren't slaves and they weren't traditional tribes. He was also very satisfied with the current state of the robbers. He felt that he was better than the average tribe. So, when he talked about tribes, he usually referred to other tribes and not robbers. Tribesmen? So fast. Sure didn't expect the tribesmen to find them so quickly. They wanted to steal the green-faced fanged beast. Feeling the murderous aura from Sure, Robber 4 still spoke slowly, "Actually, we don't have to care about them. Maybe they can help us find the green-faced fanged beast." Hearing this, Sure's eyes flashed. He didn't say anything, but he agreed with Robber 4. They had been here for a few days and hadn't made any progress. Maybe the tribesmen could find something? After finishing the meat, Robber 4 didn't stay any longer. He walked out of the village and into the dense forest outside. The slaves on guard acted as if they didn't see him. In the forest, the humid air dispelled the heat brought by the weather. Under the branches that covered the sky, there was a refreshing breeze. Robber 4 walked in the forest. Most of the weeds on the ground were taller than his waist. Walking in the forest was like walking in a sea of green. There weren't any slaves from Rock Hill City here. "How is it?" Robber 4 asked. 5 steps away from him, on the trunk of a big tree, the silhouette of a person slowly appeared. "I couldn't find anything." The person who came down from the tree said in a puzzled tone, "The slaves only know that they are here to look for something. They don't know anything else. But I can confirm that Shir is in a hurry. What is the use of the green-faced fanged beast? If Shir didn't say, we wouldn't know. But we don't have to move for now. Whether the slaves find the green-faced fanged beast or the tribesmen find it, it's a good thing for us." Understood. As he spoke, the person jumped up and ran forward, disappearing in the blink of an eye. A long, dark green polypede suddenly stood up from the thick grass. Its two pincers expanded to an exaggerated angle and pounced towards Robber 4, who was standing in the grass. But in the next moment, the person standing there disappeared. The polypede that stood up half of its body missed its target. The two antennae on its head spun like antennae, as if it was searching for something. When it couldn't find anything, it gave up on its prey and dived back into the thick grass. From afar, among the waves of green grass, some of the leaves were swaying. It was like a ripple on the surface of a lake. Then, the swaying of the leaves became smaller and smaller until it stopped. The forest returned to its previous tranquility. Chapter 540. It was a strange tree without any leaves or branches. It was like a bare wooden stake standing there, except that there were hundreds of fist-sized holes on it. Crack. The swinging axe brought with it a torrential wind, chopping down the strange-looking tree. "This is the last one." Chu-Su wiped the sweat off his forehead and chopped the tree into several sections with his axe. As he chopped down again and again, the fist-sized holes in the tree had flower bud-like things sticking out. The two closed leaves were wide open as if they wanted to bite something. This was the tree that bit off a piece of flesh from a Mang warrior today. It was poisonous and could prevent blood from clotting. If the wound was left untreated, the blood would continue to flow. After cutting the tree into small pieces, the large flower buds on the tree drooped down weakly as if they had lost their strength. Only then did Chu-Su pick up the pieces of wood and throw them into the woven net, saving them for the fire. As long as the buds were plucked from the tree, they could burn easily and were suitable for firewood. They followed Xiaoxian and a few other Yinjiao people into the mountain range and found a place to rest on another mountain not far from the Rock Hill City people. A little higher up the mountain there was an underground cave. They were all resting there. If the people from Rock Hill City had started a fire, they would have been able to see the smoke coming from the other side of the mountain. Chu-Su dragged a net of chopped firewood back to the resting place. There was a flat boulder, and under the boulder was a wide and short cave entrance. Chu-Su had to bend his knees when he entered. It looked narrow from the outside, but it was much more spacious inside. It could accommodate more than 50 people, and there were some roasted meat and fresh fruits. The cave was not crowded at all. However, because it was an underground cave, the ventilation holes around it could not bring in more light. They could only rely on water moonstones when they were inside. "It's so hot." Chu-Su threw the net of firewood aside and lay on the ground to rest. The cold stone floor made Chu-Su, who had been busy the whole morning, feel so comfortable that he let out a long sigh. When the temperature outside was getting higher, it was indeed much cooler inside the cave. In this kind of weather, it was easy to forget that it was actually winter. Everyone in the cave surrounded Xiaoxian and ignored Chu-Su. Instead, they were staring at Xiaoxian's hands. Those who were younger and had a lower status in the group could not squeeze in at all. They could only scratch their ears and cheeks at the side, listening to the discussions of the few people inside. Their hearts itched, but they had no choice but to wait at the side. "Not done yet?" Chu-Su asked the person who was pushed aside. It was a young warrior from the Eight Limbs tribe. "Should be done soon," the man replied. When Chu-Su went out of the cave to chop firewood, someone brought back a trap that was dismantled from the traps set by the slaves of Rock Hill City. Although it was taken down, the trap was still mostly intact. It was just that there were some complicated knots and structures. Many people wanted to take it down and study it carefully, but they had no idea where to start. In the end, Xiaoxian stood up and took over the task. It was obvious that the trap was set up in a dense area. There was a bait and a lasso, as well as some metal parts. It looked like a trap specially made for something. What were the people from Rock Hill City looking for? Green-faced fanged beast. Xiaoxian had already told everyone that the people from Rock Hill City were looking for the green-faced fanged beasts. However, there were many strange animals in the forest. After searching for a while, they did not find any that looked like the green-faced fanged beast. They had been here for 2 days, but they did not meet the slaves from Rock Hill City, nor did they see the so-called green-faced fanged beast. If they did not see the people from Rock Hill City stationed here for a long time, the people from other tribes would not believe Xiaoxian's words. Xiaoxian told them about the green-faced fanged beasts, but only revealed that they got the information from the robbers. Yanjiao did catch the robbers. The other tribes knew this, so they still believed part of Xiao Xian's words. However, Xiao Xian did not say why the people from Rock Hill City were looking for the green-faced fanged beasts. The other 4 people from Yanjiao also kept their mouths shut. No matter what the truth was, if they wanted to understand the purpose of the slave masters from Rock Hill City, they had to know what the green-faced fanged beast was. The other tribes saw the desert slave masters as their most threatening opponent. Every move from Rock Hill City affected their nerves. So now, when Xiao Xian was dismantling the trap, the people from other tribes gathered around. In terms of traps and catching fearsome beasts, the people from Yanjiao were better. They were willing to wait for Xiao Xian's explanation. Xiao Xian looked at the dismantled trap and let out a long sigh. It's done. How is it? The people who were waiting couldn't wait to ask. Xiao Xian picked up a small clump of green grass from the trap. This should be the green-faced fanged beast's favorite food. That's why the people from Rock Hill City used it as bait. Looking at the size of the trap, the green-faced fanged beast shouldn't be too big. Xiao Xian stood up and gestured. The size range should be from this tall to this tall. According to Xiao Xian's speculation, the green-faced fanged beast shouldn't be taller than their chest. Of course, it could be taller, but that was the answer given by the trap. There should be horns around here. Xiao Xian picked up a burned branch and drew on the ground of the cave. The drawing that Robber 7 gave them was too abstract. Even though it was exactly the same as the original drawing, they couldn't see the specific appearance of the green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian only drew it based on the information he knew. The people around Xiao Xian stretched their necks and stared at the drawing on the ground with their eyes wide open. It was as if they wanted to imprint it in their minds. Can we make an accurate guess with just one trap? Why don't we dismantle another trap? Huang Yi suggested. Again? It's not impossible, but it's easy to be noticed by the people from Rock Hill City. Someone hesitated. Do you really think they don't know? Xiao Xian threw away the branch in his hand and looked at the dismantled trap. Maybe they left this trap on purpose. On purpose? What? Could it be that they changed the trap to fool us? Huang Yi asked. Probably not. I think the people from Rock Hill City want us to find it more. Why do you say that? Because they can't find it. Xiao Xian deliberately emphasized the words can't find it. The green-faced fanged beast was indeed not easy to find. Otherwise, Yanjiao's hunting team wouldn't have been able to find it until now. The slaves in Rock Hill City should have been carefully selected, and there were bandits following them. Even if the slaves didn't notice, the bandits must have noticed the existence of this group of people. They noticed the group of people following them, but they still pretended not to see them. The two sides hadn't met yet, but instead they left a trap to catch ferocious beasts. Xiao Xian wouldn't believe that they didn't have other intentions. So, the people from Rock Hill City didn't come over these 2 days because they knew we were here? Guji walked in circles and thought, this is also a good thing. Let's go find our own things. Okay, let's follow Elder Xiao Xian's drawing and start looking for this green-faced fanged beast. Huang Yi said and looked at Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian, do you have anything else to say? Nothing else. I just want everyone to be mentally prepared. Xiao Xian said. What kind of preparation? The people in the cave looked at Xiao Xian. According to what Gula and the others saw in the sky, the people from Rock Hill City have already built houses and walls. It looks like they are prepared to stay here for a long time. Prepared to stay here for a long time? The cave was silent for a moment. Even the slaves in Rock Hill City could live in wooden houses. Were they really going to sleep in caves forever? Why don't we build houses? Huang Yi suggested. The people from the Feather Tribe had something to say at this time. It was a rare opportunity to show off. It's too eye-catching to build on the ground. Why don't we build houses and trees in the forest? It'll be harder to be discovered. Then you guys build houses. We'll go look around and see if we can find this kind of grass. Huang Yi distributed the grass that Xiao Xian handed over to everyone. Since they knew that green-faced fanged beasts like to eat this kind of grass, they should go find a place with a lot of it. He didn't believe that they couldn't find one. They split up and all the people in the cave went out at once, leaving only a few injured people behind. If they found anything unusual, they just had to blow the whistle. Xiao Xian's group of 5 moved together. Without the others, Duo Kong couldn't hold back his words. Xiao Xian, aren't you worried that those people will catch all the green-faced fanged beasts? Duo Kong didn't like to cooperate with those people. He didn't trust them. We'll see if we can find them. There were only 5 people from Yanjiao. Since the others were also targeting the green-faced fanged beasts, there was no need to hide anymore. The most important thing now was to confirm if the green-faced fang beasts were really here. If they were really here, Yanjiao would have plenty of opportunities in the future. After all, they lived in the fearsome beast forest. Duo Kong thought about it and didn't say anything more. The grass they got from the trap didn't look special at first glance, but if you looked closely, you would find that it was different from many other similar grasses in the forest. The biggest difference was that when you sniffed it up close, you could smell a faint fragrance. This fragrance separated it from other grasses. The problem was that there were so many similar grasses in the forest. You couldn't just go and sniff every one you saw, right? What if you were poisoned? As people who often hunted in the forest, the 5 people from Yinjiao had good eyesight. They were better than the others. However, they only found 5 stalks in the cave at night. On the whole mountain they only found 5 stalks. The growth rate was terrifyingly low. The possibility of green-faced fang beasts appearing here was also much lower. Don't worry, we'll continue tomorrow, Xiao Xian comforted them. Outside, the feather tribesmen were very efficient. They had already built small houses on the trees. Each house was about 10 square meters. They were covered with vines and branches, so it wasn't easy to find them. However, compared to those, the 5 people from Yanjiao still preferred to stay in the cave. That night, half of them stayed in the cave while the other half stayed outside. Compared to other sleepless nights, Xiao Xian had a good night's sleep. He even had a dream. Chapter 541. Under normal circumstances, Xiao Xian rarely dreamed. Every time he dreamed, there must be a reason, and it must be something important that might actually happen. Counting all the dreams he had so far, which one of them didn't have a strong hint? Xiao Xian sometimes wanted to have that kind of dream a few more times. Unfortunately, it wasn't something he could control. It could only be encountered and not forced. But on this night, after Xiao Xian fell asleep, he entered a dream that he hadn't had in a long time. Xiao Xian felt like he was in the middle of a mountain forest. He could hear the leaves and grass around him rustling due to the gusts of wind, like waves rising and falling. Looking up, the 2 moons in the sky were getting smaller and smaller. After all, it was the end of the year. The 2 moons had separated into thin, curved buds, unable to bring enough light to the earth. There was no starlight and the surroundings were very dark. Xiao Xian wanted to use his special vision to observe this place, but it was useless. After using it, it was as if he was shrouded in a thick layer of fog. It was worse than normal vision. Aside from the limitation of his vision, Xiao Xian felt that his mind was actually very clear. His senses were sharp, and he could clearly hear the subtle movements around him. This feeling was very strange. It was as if he knew that he was in a dream, but also had the sense of being in a real environment. Although the surroundings were very dark, Xiao Xian could still make out the rough outline of the surrounding trees and rocks. He just couldn't see them in detail. Rustle, rustle, it seemed to be the sound of the wind blowing. Amidst the rustling of the grass and trees, there was another sound. It wasn't obvious and was difficult to distinguish among the various sounds. If one's hearing wasn't good enough, they might not be able to hear it. In the dense grass, something was moving quickly. It whizzed past Xiao Xian not far away. Xiao Xian only saw a blurry shadow running into the distance like the wind. He could even feel the waves of air as the shadow ran past. Without thinking too much, Xiao Xian hurriedly chased after the sound. Based on his intuition, he felt that it should be his target. That figure ran very fast. In the dense forest, it moved freely without any hindrance. Moreover, its movements were very quiet. They ran out of the dense grassy area, past a stone field, across a small stream and into a forest. The shape of the trees there was strange. They were crooked, like weeping willows that had been shaken by a strong wind. They looked like they would fall with just a little more pressure. However, due to the dim surroundings, Xiao Xian couldn't see clearly. As Xiao Xian chased after the sound, he heard a crunching sound in front of him. It sounded like the sound of something being chewed quickly. Occasionally, there was the sound of grass being torn apart. Xiao Xian wanted to take a closer look, but the figure quickly left. It continued to move at the same speed as before, shuttling through the forest. It would occasionally stop to rest, and then there would be the sound of chewing again. All of a sudden, Xiao Xian's muscles tensed up as a strong sense of danger washed over him. From where the chewing sound came from, a pair of glowing green eyes looked over and stared straight in Xiao Xian's direction. Xiao Xian couldn't see what the eyes looked like, but he could feel a murderous aura coming straight at him. He didn't have time to think. The pair of glowing eyes in the dark lowered, no longer looking in his direction. However, the murderous aura grew stronger. Xiao Xian wanted to avoid it, but his body remained in place, facing the rapidly approaching figure. In the dark night, it seemed like a sharp sword was coming straight at him. In the next moment he felt like his entire body would be pierced through. Whoosh! Xiao Xian suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. The feeling of almost being pierced through by a sharp blade in his dream was still clear in his mind. His tense muscles made his body slightly stiff. "What's wrong, Xiao Xian?" My Duo Kong and the others heard the noise and quickly asked. During the day, Xiao Xian's analysis of the traps made many people unable to sleep at night. They were thinking about all kinds of things, including the 4 people from Yanjiao. Even if they did sleep, they couldn't sleep well. Xiao Xian sat up so suddenly that it scared the sleepy people awake. They thought they were being attacked. "I'm fine." Xiao Xian raised his hand to wipe his forehead. His hand was covered in cold sweat and he was still panting. "You don't look like you're fine," another voice in the cave said. It was a person from the 1,000-masked tribe. Xiao Xian ignored him and said to Duo Kong and the others, "It was just a dream." When the others in the cave heard Xiao Xian's words, they only thought that Xiao Xian was probably thinking too much. It was probably a nightmare. They didn't expect this kid to be so cowardly. Seeing Xiao Xian lie down again, looking like he wanted to go back to sleep, the others didn't ask any more questions. It was just a nightmare. Who hadn't had nightmares before? Especially after entering the ferocious beast mountain forest, they often had nightmares about being eaten by ferocious beasts or being swallowed by those strange plants. However, that was only the beginning. Later on it became much better. After all, those who were able to follow along were all people with decent strength in their respective tribes. Knowing that Xiao Xian could also be scared awake by nightmares, the young warriors from the other tribes felt much better. Xiao Xian, this kid could also be scared. Only while the others felt better, the 4 people from Yanjiao felt their hearts in their throats. After experiencing some things, they knew that Xiao Xian's dream wasn't an ordinary dream. When Xiao Xian was hunting with the advance party, he saw the green thief in his dreams. When he was on the other side of the sea, Xiao Xian dreamt of his ancestors and the place where he crossed the sea. All of these were great inspirations and guidance. Now, hearing Xiao Xian say that he was dreaming, the 4 people from Yanjiao wanted to ask, but considering the others in the cave, they could only hold back their questions. Because of Xiao Xian's words, the 4 people from Yanjiao were all awake. The others in the cave could also feel that the people from Yanjiao weren't calm. In the ground below the cave, some unknown creatures were wriggling. Their voices passed through the stones at the bottom of the cave and reached everyone's ears. Those creatures didn't come close, so they weren't a threat for the time being, but they could always stir up their nerves. In the forest outside the cave, the roars of nocturnal beasts could be heard a little further away. In the dark of night, the forest was still full of fighting. Xiao Xian opened his eyes and looked at the dark cave. The forest at night was a little cold, and the warmth from the stone at the bottom of the cave calmed him down a lot. He carefully recalled every detail of the dream, recalling it over and over again, memorizing it. Green-faced fang beasts? The ones in the dream were the green-faced fang beasts, right? Unfortunately, in the dream not only was the vision dim, but it also seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog. No matter what vision he used, he couldn't see clearly. He could only see the rough outline of his surroundings. This place was really different. Xiao Xian spent the rest of the night recalling the details of the dream, as well as the murderous aura. If the ones in the dream were really the green-faced fang beasts, then it could explain why they were so hard to catch. They were too fast, had strong attacks, and were very alert. It would be strange if they were easy to catch. Xiao Xian had already searched the mountain where they were resting. According to his memory, the place in the dream wasn't here. If it wasn't here, then where was it? The next day, after a simple breakfast, the people from each tribe separated and set off. The 5 people from Yanjiao did the same. They didn't say much and followed Xiao Xian. They knew that Xiao Xian must have found something. Chapter 542. After Xiao Xian went down the mountain, he began to look around. He didn't know which mountain was the one he saw in his dream. The view from above was wider, so Xiao Xian borrowed the Hui tribe's giant mountain eagle to look around. Unfortunately, from above, he couldn't see which mountain was special. There wasn't much difference between the few mountains he saw from above. These giant mountain eagles were obviously wary of and didn't trust people from the Hui tribe as much as they did people from the Hui tribe. After a round of searching, the giant mountain eagle named Shan Dao, who was carrying Xiao Xian on his back, began to get impatient. It called out a few times, urging Xiao Xian to finish looking. Gula tried to appease Shan Dao a few times, but unfortunately the giant mountain eagles had a temper. This was the most they could tolerate after compromising. They already felt uncomfortable here, and now they had to carry someone they didn't trust on their back. They had to walk around in circles in a place that made them feel uncomfortable. It would be strange if they were in a good mood. Xiao Xian drew on the animal skin roll all the places he suspected to be in his dream. Trees, streams, mountains, etc. As long as they looked similar, he marked them all. When he was almost done, Xiao Xian got down from the eagle's back. The 3 eagles of the Hui tribe weren't Cha-Cha, so Xiao Xian couldn't make them cooperate all the time. He could see that the 3 eagles were very afraid of this place. It wasn't because they sensed danger but because they felt uncomfortable. After he finished drawing, Xiao Xian didn't force them anymore. He thanked Gu La, and Xiao Xian led the 4 people from the Yinjiao to search according to the places marked on the map. They couldn't be sure where it was, so they could only use the method of searching mountain by mountain. At first, some people wanted to follow Xiao Xian, but when they saw Xiao Xian and the others looking around aimlessly, they lost their patience and didn't continue to follow them. The 5 of them quickly shuttled through the woods. Xiao Xian ran at the front, his eyes sweeping around. If he found a marked place, he would stop to take a look. If he couldn't find it, he would change to another place. After searching 3 mountains, the 5 of them stopped to rest. The forest was quieter than the other places they had passed. The place where they stopped was even quieter. They could only hear some birds and insects chirping, and the faint roars of beasts in the distance. The most obvious sound was the heavy breathing of the 5 people due to the continuous running. With their physiques, they wouldn't be this tired even if they chased their prey for several days, as long as they didn't have to fight with fearsome beasts. Along the way, they did not encounter many ferocious beasts, let alone giant ones. As long as they were careful of the plants and animals hiding in the shadows, they would be fine. They were already used to hunting in the mountains and forests. The animal and plant crisis here was nothing to them, but they felt tired. Very tired. It's so hot. Duo Kong sighed. Last winter they were almost buried in the snow. But this winter, it was unbearably hot on this side of the sea. 2 extremes. Xiao Xian stood up from the rock and looked around at the forest. There were some hidden eyes watching them. They were just predators hiding in the bushes. They were the smarter ones in the forest. They were judging and measuring the fighting power of Xiao Xian and the others. If they felt that they could attack, they would probably take action. But now they were still hesitating. Xiao Xian and the others were too strong. They didn't dare to act rashly. Xiao Xian didn't look at the figures hiding in the bushes. He just kept his guard up. But most of his attention was on the surroundings. Is it really because of the weather that you feel tired? Xiao Xian asked. When they first saw this place, they noticed the difference. The plants here were fresher and fresher. The air seemed to be very fresh, and every breath made people feel refreshed. However, that was only the beginning. The more intense the exercise, the longer the duration, the more suffocating it felt. Even if they breathed hard, they would still feel tired easily. When Xiao Xian said that, the other 4 also felt that something was wrong. Now I believe that there is a green-faced fanged beast here, Mai smiled. To him, the more special the beast was, the more special the place it lived in. Let's go, let's keep looking. Duo Kong moved his sore muscles and became more excited. To him, finding the green-faced fanged beast was the most important thing. Compared to stone weapons, he preferred the clanging sound of metal weapons. However, after using Heng's metal weapons, he was not used to using lower-quality weapons. He would rather use weapons made from high-quality stone than low-quality metal weapons. It was not convenient for him. Soon, once he found the green-faced fanged beast, he would be able to make better metal weapons to make up for the difference in technology. Duo Kang's heart was burning. He didn't care about the fatigue. It wasn't just him, the others felt the same. So what if they knew something was wrong here? They had to keep looking. The 5 of them continued to search for the next location. When they reached the 8th mountain, Xiao Xian suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. It was his first time here, but why did it feel so familiar? There was only one reason. He had seen it in his dream. The scenery in his dream was very blurry. The forest here was not very different from the places they had searched before. The distribution of species, the density of the trees, the height of the grass, etc. But now, Xiao Xian stood in the middle of the forest and the sense of familiarity grew stronger. It's here. Xiao Xian's words made the 4 of them excited. Following the familiar feeling, Xiao Xian slowly compared every place with the scenery in his dream. The originally dim background in his memory started to brighten up. The different shades of green perfectly matched the dim outline in his dream. Just then he heard the sound of shuttling quickly. Moving forward, Xiao Xian stopped and looked around. Pushing aside the grass, he saw the lightly scented grass that he had taken when he dismantled the trap. It wasn't complete grass. If he hadn't deliberately searched here, Xiao Xian wouldn't have noticed it because it was only a little bit above the ground, as if it had been bitten off by something. This was bitten by the green-faced fang beast? Duo Kang's voice trembled with excitement as he stared at Xiao Xian, waiting for him to give an answer. It should be. Without seeing the final target, Xiao Xian couldn't be sure, but in his heart he was 70% sure. There was no definite answer, but this already made Duo Kang and the others very happy. Sure enough, Xiao Xian's dream wasn't in vain. Although he wanted to find the target quickly, he couldn't rush it. Duo Kang followed beside Xiao Xian, guarding the surroundings and dealing with the threats that emerged from the grass so that Xiao Xian could focus on the road. Walking out of the forest, Xiao Xian saw the stream that wasn't deep, and he seemed to hear the sound of flowing water in his dream. When he stepped into the water, Xiao Xian felt that something was wrong. The sound was wrong. The sound of flowing water in his dream was softer. Could it be that he had stepped on stones? That couldn't be right. There were no stones in the middle of the stream to step on, but Xiao Xian couldn't find a reasonable answer to explain it, so he could only skip this part. After crossing the stream and seeing the crooked trees, Xiao Xian was no longer suspicious. Looking from the air, he couldn't see the shape of the trees. He could only see the dense foliage, so it was difficult to find this forest. Standing on the ground, it was different. The crooked trunks were clearly displayed in his field of vision. This was the place. There was no mistake. The stench of rotting flesh wafted through the air. There were also the threatening roars of birds and beasts. The five of them looked at each other and walked over with light footsteps. They were getting closer and closer to the place where they had been attacked in the dream. The stench of rotting flesh was also getting stronger. The scavenger birds pecked at each other, fighting for food. Some small beasts roared and chased away the birds that had landed. Their behavior caused another scuffle. There were also some flying insects the size of bees wandering around. There was a 2-meter-tall beast carcass. In this area it was considered large, but its body was thin and long. When it stood upright it was about 7 or 8 meters tall. Now less than a quarter of the carcass had been eaten. It was impossible to see what the beast looked like when it was alive. The birds, beasts and insects all surrounded the carcass to fight for food. Xiao Xian didn't go over. It wasn't wise to go over now. It would attract the attention of the scavenger animals. Beasts would also go crazy when protecting their food. When the carcass was almost finished, the birds gradually flew away. The beasts that had eaten their fill left one by one. The insects on the ground were also almost gone. Xiao Xian approached the carcass. Waving the weapon in his hand, he chased away the flying insects. Xiao Xian looked at the carcass in front of him. There were only bones left. It was here that he had been attacked. No, to be precise, perhaps the one that had been attacked wasn't Xiao Xian. At that time, the one that had been attacked was probably this dead beast. There was a bone plate in front of the beast's chest. It should have been used for protection. However, Xiao Xian saw a round hole in the bone plate. The bone plate was used for protection, but it had been easily pierced through. It was clear that the sharp weapon as well as the speed and strength of the attack. No wonder he had felt the danger of the sharp blade in the dream. This should be it. There are only some fresh bite marks on the bones. It should have been bitten by the scavenger animals. Other than that, I don't see any other wounds, Mai analyzed after looking at the carcass. It doesn't look like there was a fight around here. Tuo glanced at the surrounding forest with doubt. It was a fatal blow. Xiao Xian pointed at the round hole. If it was really the green-faced fang beast that killed it, we have to be more careful. The green-faced fang beast didn't eat meat. That was why it left after killing the beast and left the carcass to the scavenger animals. Do you think the reason why there are fewer large beasts in this area is because all the threatening beasts have been slaughtered? Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 543. Xiao Xian did not find any other evidence. That was the end of his dream. However, being able to find these traces was already a very big progress. It was much more reliable than burying his head and searching aimlessly. Xiao Xian and the other four walked around and found a few more traces of the grass that the green-faced fang beast liked to eat. However, they were all gnawed to the point where only a small part of the grass was left. After marking them on a rough map, Xiao Xian removed the bone plate with a hole from the beast carcass and walked back with Duo Kang and the others. On the way back to the mountain where they rested, Xiao Xian felt someone watching them from afar. However, when Xiao Xian looked over, that person quickly left. His speed wasn't any slower than Robber Seven's, and his observation was much sharper. Xiao Xian had only turned his head slightly, and before he could even turn around, That person had already fled at full speed. Duo Kong saw Xiao Xian's reaction and guessed that someone was nearby. He became alert. Who is it? It should be someone from Robber 7. He's not any worse than Robber 7. Maybe he's even ranked higher in Robber 7, Xiao Xian said and did not chase after him. Instead, he carried the bone plate and continued to walk back. After Xiao Xian and the other 4 left, the person who had run far away waited for a while before circling back. He then followed the path that Xiao Xian and the other 4 went until he saw the dismantled beast carcass. He didn't see what Xiao Xian and the other 4 did here. When he came to the area, he saw Xiao Xian and the other 4 leaving with a bone. He was also surprised to see someone from Yanjiao. The person looked at the beast carcass carefully and then looked around. The grass that had been trampled on quickly gathered back together, but there were still faint traces left. From these traces, he could find the grass that had been gnawed to the point where only a small section was left. Seeing this, the person intertwined his fingers in a strange position to form the shape of a conch. Then he blew into it. A series of beast-like snoring noises rang out. They weren't sharp but rather deep and spread far and wide. Not long after, 2 more figures came over. They were like agile monkeys jumping around in the forest. Have you found it? The person who had just arrived asked. No, I just found something. The person who sent the signal just now told him what he had seen. That should be it. The Yanjiao people are really good at finding wild beasts. Then should we inform Shishir? Someone asked. Don't tell him for the time being. I'm worried that he won't be able to hold himself back and bring people here. That will affect the tribesmen's search. Let's wait for the tribesmen to find them first. Compared to the slaves, they felt that the tribesmen would move faster. It's best if the tribesmen find the green-faced fanged beast first, then we can steal it from the tribesmen, someone said sneakily. They like to look for treasures, but they like to steal things from others even more. That would make them happier. While they were discussing the plan, Xiao Xian's group of 5 had already returned to their resting place. It was already dark. The other people who went out to search had already returned, but they didn't see the 5 Yanjiao people. Gula and the others were worried, so they rode an eagle out to search. When they saw Xiao Xian's group, they returned together. What's this? Gula asked when he saw Xiao Xian holding a bone with a hole in it. I found this thing today. I suspect that the hole was made by the green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian didn't tell them about the dream. He only told them about the results of today's search. Even if they didn't live a hunting life before, the other tribesmen had a general understanding of the hardness of beast bones. Not to mention, after entering the fearsome beast forest and killing many fearsome beasts, they could give an accurate evaluation. Although this bone plate was considered hard, it was barely enough to be used as a shield. Even so, it wasn't easy to poke a hole in it. Not to mention, the hole in the bone plate didn't seem to have any signs of stopping. It was pierced with a whoosh and there were no cracks or small gaps. Only one hole? It's definitely not the horn of the green-faced fanged beast. As I said before, the green-faced fanged beast has hooves but no horns. If the hole was really made by the green-faced fanged beast, then it should be its teeth, Huang Yi analyzed. But even if the green-faced fanged beast caused all this, there's only one hole. Didn't Xiao Xian also say that the green-faced fanged beast has 2 pointed teeth? Chusu asked. Maybe it only has 1 tooth, Huang Yi guessed. For them, the purpose of this trip was to figure out what the slave owners wanted and what they wanted to do. Now they were just waiting to catch a green-faced fanged beast and bring it back for research. No matter what the truth was and whether the hole in the bone plate was made by the green-faced fanged beast, everyone had to be vigilant. If it could easily poke a hole in the bone plate, it would be even easier to poke a human. At night, some people still slept in the trees outside the cave, some slept in the cave, and the rest took turns to be on guard. As the night deepened, the surroundings began to quiet down. The insects seemed to have shut up and it was particularly quiet. Rustle, rustle, it was like the sound of the wind blowing the waves of grass with a rhythmic rhythm. In such a dark night, there was a strange sense of calmness. This kind of night made people sleepy. Among the swaying grass and the sound of the branches colliding with each other, there was a sound that was not obvious. It was coming closer to the mountain. The warrior on guard looked in that direction but did not find anything. There was only the movement of the thick grass swaying with the wind. He stared for a few seconds before turning to leave. Just as he turned around, a pair of eyes with a dim light appeared from the grass. The warrior who had just taken 2 steps felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The feeling of being targeted by a prey was like being in an ice cellar. He quickly turned to look in that direction and threw a spear in his hand. The spear pierced into the grass, and the people on guard only saw a figure flash in the dark forest and disappear in the blink of an eye. What was that? One person asked. I don't know. Could it be the green-faced fang beast? Another warrior asked. No way. The green-faced fang beast came here by itself? I didn't see it clearly. Maybe it's just an ordinary beast in the forest. Let's build a fence tomorrow, someone suggested. I think we should build one too. The warriors on guard whispered to each other. After the figure left the mountain, it passed through the forest and came to another mountain. Finally, it stopped and raised its head slightly as if it was sniffing something in the air. It smelled a fragrance that it liked. Then, like the wind, it passed through the forest until it came to the place where the fragrance came from. There was a trap there. It was similar to the one the tribesmen took back the other day, but the workmanship was better. In the trap there was a small bunch of grass tied to it. It was the source of the fragrance. The figure stopped there for a moment, then slowly walked in that direction. The next day, the slaves from Rock Hill City routinely checked the traps and found that the grass tied to the trap was gone. The trap had been activated before, but it was broken again. The people from Rock Hill City reported this to Shir. Shir was very happy. Even if they didn't catch it, it was good as long as there was news. He immediately ordered people to increase the range and number of traps. He also checked the trap that failed to catch the green-faced fang beast to see what the problem was. If it didn't work, he would change the material. Chapter 544. The movements of the slaves naturally couldn't be hidden from the people of this tribe. Both sides had a tacit understanding. They knew of each other's existence, but they didn't take the initiative to attack. They rarely stepped into each other's mountains, but if there was any movement, they would know. They were secretly watching each other. Did a green-faced fang beast appear last night? I think so, but I don't know if they caught it yet. From the looks of it, they're setting up more traps. The elders of the other tribes were discussing. In fact, after studying the traps set by the people of Rock Hill City, the people of the Longbow tribe and Thousand Masks tribe also made a replica. They plucked more grass. The next day, when they heard that there was a green-faced fang beast next door, they excitedly rushed over to see their own replica trap. Unfortunately, they only saw a smooth trap. Not a single strand of grass was left on it. Even the lasso on the trap was barely touched. The replica was only a replica. It was still a far cry from the real trap used to catch the green-faced fang beast. Although they didn't catch it, they were sure that a green-faced fang beast was here. When they thought of this, they became excited. They didn't care what the green-faced fang beast was for, they just had to catch it and bring it back. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to calm down. The people of the Mang tribe and Eight Limbs tribe saw this and started to set up their own traps. However, they were resting on another mountain. The grass on this mountain was almost completely plucked. The traces of human activity were too obvious. If they set up a trap, it wouldn't be effective. The people of the Feather tribe used 3 days to train a bird that lived nearby. When they chose to set up traps with the Longbow tribe, they also trained a bird that moved at night. They planned to let the bird spy on them. They were good at this skill. The 5 people from Jianghu moved together with the Hui tribe. They borrowed their eagle and flew to the place where they found the animal bones yesterday. The animal bones that were relatively complete yesterday were now only a few pieces left. More than half of it was gone. They didn't know what ate it. Xiao Xian didn't look at the animal bones anymore. He glanced around and took out a straw rope. The people of the Hui tribe were in the sky, so they couldn't see what was happening here. There were only 5 Yinjiao people in the forest. If there was any movement, they would inform the people in the sky. Not divination was not a panacea. Most of the time, it was impossible to perform a successful divination on the unknown. However, the clues he had gained over the past few days were increasing, especially the activation of the traps at Rock Hill City last night. This confirmed Xiao Xian's conjecture. This time he should be able to divine it. He entered the state of divination, and the rope around his finger moved. A moment later, Xiao Xian looked at the knot on the rope and walked forward. He blew a wooden whistle to signal the people in the air to follow. If a person were to step on the grass in such a place, they would more or less leave some traces, which could not be completely recovered in a short period of time, just like how the robbers could find their way by following the traces left behind. However, wherever the green-faced fang beasts walked, there were no traces of them. Other than the grass that had been bitten off and trampled on, it was difficult to find any other signs of their activity. As Xiao Xian walked in the direction indicated by the divination, he thought about the reason behind it. Other than the ancestors of the slave masters in Rock Hill City, no one else here had seen the green-faced fang beast. There was a limit to what they could deduce from the traps. Moreover, the traps set by the Rock Hill City people were not perfect. Otherwise, the green-faced fanged beasts wouldn't have escaped. Yes, before coming here, Xiao Xian lurked around the slaves who set up the traps and heard bits and pieces of what they were talking about. Although they didn't say it out loud, Xiao Xian could roughly guess what was going on. What was so special about the green-faced fanged beast that the Gongjia tribe would choose it for? Why couldn't the blood of other beasts be used, but their blood could? Thinking about it, they went down the mountain and went around a few mountains in the valley. Then they came to another mountain that didn't look special. The trees, flowers, birds, and insects here weren't much different from the other mountains. The only difference was probably in front of them. Not long after Xiao Xian went up the mountain, they saw a patch of dense grass that reached their shoulders. There were trees around, but there weren't many ancient trees. The thickest tree had a trunk as thick as 4 or 5 people. This was nothing compared to the fearsome beast forest. Although it wasn't thick or old enough, it was very tall. There were many branches on the tree, and the thin branches and dense leaves covered most of the sky above. The grass here was much taller and denser than other places. It seemed like the grass had an advantage over the trees. If Xiao Xian and the rest went into the grass under the shade of the trees, they would only be able to poke their heads out. There weren't any insects around. Other than the eagles of the Hui tribe, there were no other birds in the sky. It seemed like they were avoiding this place on purpose. Duo Kong was about to ask when Xiao Xian raised his hand to stop him. Listening carefully, the sound of grass waves blown by the mountain wind was rustling, and in the midst of the rustling of the dense grass leaves, there was a sound like boiling steam spurting out of a slit. The sound wasn't loud, so it wasn't obvious here. But if people with good hearing listened carefully, they would be able to tell. Xiao Xian pointed in a direction and gave the 4 of them a look. Needless to say, Duo Kong and the rest ran in 2 different directions. Xiao Xian went straight in one direction. They didn't go straight into the grass. There would be too much movement if they went in. Also, the grass was too thick and blocked their line of sight. There was no way to know what was hiding under the thick grass. Xiao Xian and the rest used the tree branches as support and approached from above. Xiao Xian and the rest planned to approach slowly and quietly. Then they would surround the person hiding in the grass and catch him. However, as soon as they moved, a figure jumped out of the grass and ran away with its back facing Xiao Xian and the rest. Xiao Xian had calculated the approximate size and back height of the green-faced fanged beast based on the traps set by the people of Rock Hill City. If there was a green-faced fanged beast here, it should be completely buried in the grass. After all, according to Xiao Xian's calculation, the taller green-faced fanged beast should only reach their chest. However, Xiao Xian and the rest could barely stick their heads out of the grass, let alone a green-faced fanged beast that was shorter than them. However, the figure that suddenly jumped out of the grass was much taller than the grass. It wasn't a green-faced fanged beast? Did they guess wrong? The moment they saw the figure jump out, Duo Kong and the rest hesitated for a moment. Only Xiao Xian didn't stop. That's it. Chase. Xiao Xian shouted. That's it? The one that was so much taller than the grass? No, that's not right. It wasn't taller than the grass because of its size, but because it was directly on top of the grass. It was really running. Yang Guang was projected from the gaps between the branches, forming beams of light that crisscrossed under the forest. A figure with green stripes on his body was running like the wind, stepping on the waves of grass. Chapter 545. Xiao Xian and the other 4 followed closely behind. When Duo Kong and the other 3 saw the green-faced fanged beast, they hesitated for a moment, but in that moment they were already far behind. The prey in front of them was getting faster and faster, ignoring the trees and bushes. Whether it was the thick bushes or the surrounding trees, it didn't affect its speed at all. On the one hand, it could walk on the grass. On the other hand, it seemed to be very familiar with this area. It knew how to run and where to run like a fish swimming in water. Behind it, Xiao Xian couldn't see its hooves clearly because it was moving too fast. He could only see the waves of grass under its hooves swaying as it ran. Every time it swayed, it was like a wave that pushed the beast to escape at a faster speed. In the sky, Gula and the others from the Hui tribe heard Xiao Xian's shout and chased after the figure below. Although there were many branches in the forest blocking most of the view from the sky, there were still many gaps for Gula to see the figure running below. Even if Gula and the others couldn't see clearly with the giant mountain eagle's eyesight, they could still lock onto the fleeing figure. But the prey seemed to know that there was a predator in the sky, so it ran towards a denser forest instead of an open area. Xiao Xian and the other 4 couldn't stop it for the time being. The people in the sky could only keep up, but they couldn't catch it. They could only watch as it ran into the denser forest. Screech, the giant mountain eagle in the sky screeched unwillingly. After the prey ran into the denser forest, it couldn't chase anymore. Losing sight of the prey, the eagle circled in the sky, not knowing where to go. Gula cursed and signaled the giant mountain eagle to fly lower. He jumped down from the eagle's back and entered the forest with Duo Kong and the other 3 who had just caught up. There were still 3 people from the Hui tribe watching from the sky. If they saw anything, they would alert the people below. The only one missing was Xiao Xian. Because only Xiao Xian could catch up. Xiao Xian was still able to keep up by stepping on tree trunks, but Duo Kong and the rest were left behind. Now that they had lost their target, no one would be in a good mood. Was that the green-faced fang beast? Gula asked. If Xiao Xian said so, then it must be. I didn't expect the green-faced fang beast to be able to run on grass. Duo Kong panted. This was as difficult as catching a thief. If he wasn't careful, he would lose his chance. He was so close. I shouldn't have hesitated. Grass running? Previously, Gula was above and could not see the situation below clearly. When he landed, he could no longer see the figure. Now that he heard Duo Kang's words, Gula was truly shocked. He had only seen those with wings flying on the grass. How could the green-faced fang beast have such an ability? Duo Kong and the others didn't know much. In fact, they only saw a blurry silhouette and didn't see the green-faced fang beast's full appearance. Duo Kong and the others only knew this much more than Gula do. However, now was not the time to talk about it. Split up and search. In such a large forest, they couldn't find any traces of Zhang Xian, so they had no choice but to split up to search. Hopefully Xiao Xian could catch up to the green-faced fang beast. The 4 of them thought to themselves. Previously, Xiao Xian was able to catch a thief. Now he should be able to catch up to the green-faced fang beast, right? Xiao Xian did indeed catch up. However, this was not Yanjiao's territory that he was familiar with. The geographical advantage was more advantageous for the green-faced fang beast. All he could do was not to be left behind and find an opportunity to tell the others. During the chase, Xiao Xian couldn't be distracted to leave tracking marks for Xiao Xian and the others. The path of the figure in front of them was too tricky. If he wasn't careful, he might even hit a tree. In the dense forest, the 2 figures ran one after the other. Sometimes, when they changed directions too quickly, Xiao Xian would leave footprints on the tree trunks and even break branches. However, this kind of situation was rare and couldn't leave a continuous trace for the people behind. A bug beast that was sleeping in the grass was stomped on by Xiao Xian, who jumped down from the tree trunk. When it stood up and angrily looked around, Xiao Xian's figure was already gone. Running out of a mountain, through a valley, to another mountain, and then over another mountain. The figure in front of them was still running tirelessly and didn't show any signs of slowing down. Just when Xiao Xian thought that this would be a long chase, the running figure in front of them suddenly stopped as if it had stepped on the brakes. Xiao Xian didn't dare to approach immediately. He had limited knowledge of the green-faced fang beast. When he didn't know their attacking habits, Xiao Xian would keep a relatively safe distance from it, especially when he knew that it could easily kill a beast that was much bigger than it. Previously, he was only focused on chasing and didn't care about anything else. Now that it had stopped, Xiao Xian realized that the one in front of him seemed to be a little fat. No, it wasn't fat. It was more like it had eaten too much. It had 4 short and wide hooves, a round belly and green patterns on its body. The colors were of different shades and there was no pattern to it. Its entire face was completely green. There were no other colors. It looked like an animal like a cow or a sheep, but there were obvious differences. On both sides of its wide jaw, there was a tusk that grew diagonally upwards. On the other side there was only a small section. It must have been broken for some reason. There was only one tusk. Chapter 546. The green-faced fang beast ran at high speed, creating a whistling sound as it ran. It turned into a green light and rushed straight towards Xiao Xian. Although its body looked round and heavy, it gave people the feeling that it could float. Xiao Xian did not retreat immediately. He pulled his abdomen back and twisted his upper body to the side with his knees to avoid the fierce attack. At the same time, he twisted his wrist holding the hilt of the sword. The sword drew a bright light and slashed towards the green-faced fang beast. It looked like he was about to cut off the beast's head. Unexpectedly, this ferocious beast was not only fast but also very agile. When Xiao Xian's sword was about to cut down, it jumped up and turned its body, twisting its head and using its tusks to block the blade. Clang! The beast's fangs collided with the blade directly, but it did not break. It only left a small dent. The green-faced fanged beast did not expect Xiao Xian's weapon to be such a threat to it. After being hit by the rebound force, it bounced up like a rubber ball. It quickly moved its hoofs to increase the distance between them. It stopped 20 steps away from Xiao Xian and glared at Xiao Xian fiercely. Xiao Xian wasn't sure if it was his own illusion, but the green on the green-faced fanged beast's face seemed to have deepened. Coupled with the murderous look in its eyes and the strange wrinkles on its face, it looked even more ferocious and ferocious. In fact, Xiao Xian knew that if he wanted to get the blood of the green-faced fanged beast for casting, it would be best to capture it alive. The trap set by the people of Rock Hill City was to capture it alive, not to kill it. However, in this situation he knew that this beast was very aggressive. When it attacked, it would kill. Xiao Xian was not sure if he could capture it alive easily. Qi, the green-faced fanged beast breathed out hot air from its two big nostrils again and stomped its hooves. Obviously, it had no intention of letting Xiao Xian go. Its sharp fangs appeared in front of Xiao Xian in the blink of an eye. Xiao Xian didn't dare to be careless. When he thought of the beast's corpse, he had a feeling that if he was pierced by the teeth, no matter if he was a human or a beast, no matter if he was a junior or senior totem warrior, or if he was pierced by the teeth, he would definitely die. There was no evidence, but his intuition told him otherwise. The rushing body brought with it a strong gust of wind. It was just a gust of wind, but Xiao Xian felt as if he had been smashed by a wooden plank. Still not retreating, Xiao Xian didn't even try to dodge this time. Instead, he used his sword to block this lightning-fast attack. The sharp, steel-like fangs pierced the sword, producing a sharp sound. The tip of the fang slid across the sword, producing a brief zang sound. Xiao Xian gritted his teeth, the veins on his sword arm bulging. The beast's charging force was very strong. It wasn't that it was strong, it was just too fast. With its speed, every charge was like a cannonball. Even if it didn't have fangs, it wasn't something an ordinary person could withstand. Plus, it had a sharp, steel-like fangs. Heng's special sword could only leave a shallow mark on its fangs. Since the attack failed, the green-faced fanged beast decided to retreat again. It didn't want to continue fighting. Seeing this, Xiao Xian had an idea. However, it was just a guess, he couldn't be sure. Clang, clang. The third attack, the fourth attack. The idea in Xiao Xian's mind grew stronger and stronger. After blocking these 4 attacks, Xiao Xian had a feeling that the green-faced fanged beast was very light. It wasn't as heavy as it looked. It probably wasn't good at close combat, preferring to attack from a distance. It relied on its speed and fangs to deliver a fatal blow to its prey. That was why it had chosen to temporarily retreat several times after failing to hit its target with a single strike. However, it was just a guess. To be sure, he had to prove it. The green-faced fanged beast's 4th attack did not hit its target, so it started to go berserk. Its nostrils, which were much bigger than Xiao Xian's fists, were spewing out hot air like boiling water. After that, it moved its hooves again for the 5th attack. With the experience from the previous 4 attacks, Xiao Xian calmly blocked the attack this time. He didn't want to give it a chance to run away. He exerted force on the soles of his feet and rushed in the direction where the green-faced fanged beast was retreating. The muscles on his arm that wasn't holding the sword jumped with the increase of totem power. He flipped his wrist and grabbed the long fangs of the green-faced fanged beast. He exerted force trying to throw the beast to the ground. If he wanted to catch it alive, he had to make it unconscious first. What? This was Xiao Xian's first thought. Slippery. This was Xiao Xian's second thought. The green-faced fanged beast wasn't as heavy as it looked. Xiao Xian was already mentally prepared for this. He also guessed it, so he wasn't surprised. If it wasn't so light, how could it run on the grass? It didn't have wings like a bird. In addition, Xiao Xian didn't expect the fangs in his hand to be so slippery. After all, the fangs didn't look smooth. There were even a lot of scratches made by Xiao Xian's sword. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be so slippery. However, the fangs in his hand that should have been controlled were like slippery loaches. As the green-faced fanged beast struggled, it escaped his control. Sensing that something was wrong, Xiao Xian quickly retracted his hand. If Xiao Xian hadn't retracted his hand quickly, his hand would have been scratched by the fangs or even worse. The green-faced fanged beast that escaped Xiao Xian's control stopped again. However, this time it was further away from Xiao Xian. It was probably scared by Xiao Xian's actions just now. The green-faced fanged beast stared fiercely at Xiao Xian. Its dark pupils quickly contracted and dilated, and the wrinkles on its face increased. Just when Xiao Xian thought it was going to attack for the 6th time, The green-faced fanged beast moved its hooves, turned 180 degrees and ran away. Running away when you can't win was the habit of most beasts and humans. It was also the most correct choice for survival. Duo Kong and the others hadn't come over yet. Xiao Xian blew the wooden whistle and quickly left a mark on the trunk next to him. Then he continued to chase forward. It was rare to encounter a green-faced fanged beast, so he couldn't just let it go. However, when it came to running, the green-faced fanged beast with a round belly was really hard to catch. It ran to places with many trees and grass. Its hooves were like the wind as it stepped on the thick grass. It was Xiao Xian's first time encountering such a difficult beast. Because it didn't have a fixed running route and direction, and because it was fast, Xiao Xian couldn't even throw a dart at it. However, the beast in front wouldn't run aimlessly, right? According to Xiao Xian's understanding, many beasts that lived in the mountains and forests had their own ways of avoiding danger. When they encountered a threat that they couldn't handle, they would run to places that were difficult to avoid, such as underground caves, rivers, tall trees, and so on. So, where was the green-faced fanged beast in front of him going? This place surrounded by green mountains was much larger than Xiao Xian thought. During the chase, Xiao Xian paid attention to the terrain so that he wouldn't get lost. During the chase he found a lot of unfamiliar plants. Perhaps because of the unique environment, there were a lot of flowers and trees that Xiao Xian had never seen before. However, this was understandable. The only strange thing was that there were no large beasts, right? After chasing for such a long time, Xiao Xian had seen other larger beasts, but he had never seen a giant one. This was the same as what they found when they first entered this area. If it was really because of the green-faced fanged beast, then how many green-faced fanged beasts would it take to make it so difficult to even see a large beast in this area? Could it be that the one in front wanted to run back to its nest? If that was the case, Xiao Xian had to follow it even more closely. If it was an ordinary warrior, even if he could continue running, he would have slowed down and would not be able to maintain his full speed. Even for Xiao Xian, after chasing for so long, he was obviously tired. However, the green-faced fanged beast in front still maintained its extremely fast speed. The only thing that Xiao Xian heard was that the snorting sound was a little louder. How long is it going to run? Xiao Xian looked at the green-faced fanged beast running in front of him and thought. In front of the forest was a mountain wall. The green-faced fanged beast in front of them didn't slow down at all, nor did it change direction. Although it was still running around, its general direction was towards the mountain wall in front of them. Could it be that there was something on the mountain wall? Xiao Xian chased the figure in front of him out of the forest. He quickly glanced at the mountain wall in front of him and didn't find anything wrong. It was similar to the mountain walls in other places. No. Xiao Xian's gaze swept across the mountain wall and fell on a spot near the ground. There was a hole there, and the green-faced fanged beast that rushed out of the forest was heading towards that hole. Is that where it's heading? Xiao Xian didn't know how deep the hole in the mountain wall was, and he didn't know if there were other entrances or exits. If it really rushed in, he didn't know if he could catch it again. Although Xiao Xian really wanted to stop the green-faced fanged beast in front of him, he was still one step behind. He could only watch as it got closer and closer to the hole in the mountain wall. The long hair on its head was blown away by the wind. The front half of its body was slightly bent, and the fangs that were slightly higher than its head were tilted downwards. It folded its front hooves and shot towards the hole. Looking at the series of movements, he knew that it wasn't the first time it did this. It was very skilled. Xiao Xian slowed down his footsteps and stood there, watching the green-faced figure rush towards the hole in the mountain wall. Bang! There was a muffled sound like a hand hitting an empty bottle. Xiao Xian looked at the situation at the hole, and the muscles on his face twitched. He then lifted his feet and walked towards the hole. At the entrance of the cave on the mountain wall, the blue and white figure completely blocked the entrance. Half of it was still exposed outside. Its round belly was stuck at the entrance of the cave, and its folded front hooves were facing outwards. It was also stuck there, unable to exert any strength. Its hind legs that were exposed outside kicked hard, but its hooves were short, and its round belly was stuck there. It couldn't bend its body, so when its two hind hooves kicked, it was just short of the mountain wall. It couldn't exert any strength, so it could only kick in the air. Its short tail was circling around vigorously, and it seemed to be in a hurry. Chapter 547. Walking to the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian looked at the lump that was blocking the entrance. He felt that the cave was a little too small and this one was so fat. It would be a little too small for it to squeeze in, unless its body was soft and flexible. Sure enough, it was blocked, right? It was rushing so fast just now and was blocking the entrance even harder. If no one pulled it out, who knew how long it would be stuck there? Unless it was starving and skinny. It was said that the green-faced fanged beast's skin was very thick, but Xiao Xian saw that most of its fur was not long. The different shades of green intertwined and looked very messy. However, this color was indeed an excellent camouflage in the forest. Coupled with its reaction speed and attack power that were completely different from its body size, it might not be able to dominate this place, but at least it would be hard to find a worthy opponent. Xiao Xian didn't know if this green-faced fanged beast had fallen into the traps set by the tribesmen or Rock Hill City people. The only thing he could be sure of was that this was the one he saw in his dream. The green-faced fanged beast that was stuck there kicked its hooves and tried to move forward. Unfortunately, it was useless. It couldn't get out or squeeze in. Its tail was swinging faster and faster. It was probably really desperate. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have put in so much effort, said Xiao Xian. He had been studying the traps set by the Rock Hill City people for the past few days. He wanted to use those traps to catch the beast, but he didn't expect to encounter such a situation. Looking around, Xiao Xian planned to find some vines to tie this beast up. It would be a pity if he didn't take advantage of such a good opportunity. After taking 2 steps, Xiao Xian stopped and turned back to the entrance of the cave. He took out the white worm silk from his animal skin bag. Originally he wanted to use the silk to set up the trap, but now he changed his mind. Xiao Xian didn't know if ordinary vines could tie it up, so it was safer to use the silk. The front hooves were already stuck, so Xiao Xian could only tie up the back hooves to prevent it from escaping after he pulled it out. The green-faced fanged beast was too fast and hard to catch up with. The green-faced fanged beast couldn't run, and its strength was not as good as Xiao Xian's. No matter how hard the green-faced fanged beast tried, it couldn't move. Xiao Xian wrapped the white worm silk in his hand around the green-faced fanged beast's hind legs and tied it up. After tying it up, Xiao Xian reached out and poked the beast's hide. He could feel the thickness of its hide, but there was something strange about it. Other than the thickness of its hide, there was something wrong with it. When he tied it up, there was a strange feeling. He reached out and pressed down. Xiao Xian continued to exert force and his fingers sank in. He had already used his special vision to examine the beast. There was nothing wrong with its bones and it was not pregnant. It had been running all the way here, so it should be very familiar with this place. If it could not squeeze in before, it would not have run so fast and so accurately. It was definitely not fat. Thinking about it, the only possibility was that it had eaten too much. However, it was rare for a beast to swell like this after eating too much. Xiao Xian had not seen many beasts like this in his years of hunting. Moreover, other beasts, even if they could have such a big change after eating too much, were different from this beast. They would not be so soft. This green-faced fanged beast's stomach seemed to be filled with air. After being poked a few times, the green-faced fanged beast struggled even more, but now, no matter how hard it struggled, it could not get out of the hole. Xiao Xian could hear the sound coming from inside the hole. It should be the green-faced fanged beast roaring. It sounded like the wind was blowing hard. Without waiting any longer, Xiao Xian made sure that it was tied up and stretched out his arms. His arms were like a clamp, clamping the beast's exposed torso outside the hole. His feet stepped on the wall of the hole and his arms pulled out forcefully. Pop! With a soft sound, the green-faced fanged beast that was stuck in the hole was finally pulled out. Its first reaction when it was free was to twist its neck and stab Xiao Xian with its fangs. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian held onto its torso tightly. Before it could stab with its fangs, Xiao Xian pressed it to the ground, face down. Xiao Xian moved one hand to the back of its neck and used the other hand to tie its front legs and mouth with the white worm silk. Its hind legs could not move, it could not run, and it could not exert any strength. Its whole body was pressed to the ground. In terms of strength, it was no match for Xiao Xian, so it could only let Xiao Xian tie it up. After its front and back legs were tied up, the green-faced fanged beast lost its ability to move. At most, it could only roll on the ground. It kept breathing out from its nostrils and its entire beast face looked gloomy. Why aren't they here yet? Xiao Xian blew the wooden whistle, but he still did not hear any response from Duo Kong and the others. There was also no sign of the Hui tribesmen in the sky. Did they not catch up? Or was there something else that prevented him from doing so? Since Duo Kong and the others did not come, Xiao Xian could only bring this green-faced fanged beast back. Looking at the sky, Xiao Xian lifted the green-faced fanged beast with its head facing outwards, not giving it a chance to stab him with its fangs. Just as he was about to go back the way he came before entering the forest, Xiao Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. In the dark forest, the grass swayed with the wind and the leaves rustled. Other than that, there seemed to be no other movement. However, Xiao Xian did not step into the forest again. Instead, he quickly retreated. Just as Xiao Xian retreated, there were a few whooshing sounds in the forest. 3 bone spurs as thick as fingers suddenly shot out from a tree. One of them pierced the spot where Xiao Xian was standing, while the other 2 shot behind Xiao Xian. Finally, they hit the mountain wall and made 2 crisp sounds. 2 figures suddenly appeared from the trees. Another 2 spear-like bone darts flew toward Xiao Xian. When they threw the bone darts, they did not stop. Instead, they also closed in on Xiao Xian. Although these 2 people were not as fast as the green-faced fanged beast, their movements were still quite light. The sound of them jumping on the tree trunk was very soft. People with bad hearing might not be able to hear them. Xiao Xian dodged the 2 bone darts. The approaching figures quickly enlarged in his eyes. He threw the green-faced fanged beast he was carrying up into the air. He held the sword in his other hand and swept it out. The sword made a whistling sound as it cut through the air. It was like a raging torrent. When he was facing the green-faced fanged beast, Xiao Xian still wanted to hold back a little. However, when facing these people, his attitude was different. When Xiao Xian moved, the 2 people changed their stance. One of them jumped up while the other was still facing Xiao Xian. They blocked Xiao Xian's sword. Clang. In the ear-piercing sound of metal hitting metal, the trembling sword reflected countless rays of light from Yang. It was as if a ball of light had suddenly exploded on the sword. The person who blocked Xiao Xian's sword had heard of the Yinjiao people's great strength before. He had also heard of the Yinjiao people's way of doing things. However, when he actually faced it, he clearly felt it. This sword with a sharp momentum brought about a brutal impact. It felt like the sword in his hand was about to be shaken out of his hand. However, the person's reaction was fast. When he blocked the sword, he was already prepared to retreat. He used the force of the rebound to retreat. After swinging his sword, Xiao Xian did not look at his opponent. Instead, he raised his hand and grabbed the tail of the green-faced fanged beast as if he had already planned it. When he threw the beast, he used force to make it head up and tail down. Above, the person who was about to touch the green-faced fanged beast suddenly found that the target that was thrown up was pulled back. Chapter 548. After pulling the prey back, Xiao Xian grabbed the green-faced fanged beast's tail and swung it at the person. On the beast's head, the long fangs were facing forward. Xiao Xian was using it as another weapon. Seeing that the target had been pulled back, the person realized the danger and twisted his body in the air. His waist and his entire chest quickly caved in. In an incredible way, he suddenly bent into an arc as if he had no bones. The green-faced fanged beast that was swung by Xiao Xian almost scratched the person's chest. However, one of the person's arms was not spared and was scratched by the fangs. According to the distance, even if it was a scratch, it was not a big wound. It was much less dangerous than being stabbed in the chest. However, the sudden pain from the wound on his arm made him pause when he landed on the ground. Oh, they had been through a lot. Most of the time, even without looking at the wound, they could guess what kind of wound it was. The size, depth, and how much blood would flow. However, what happened just now should have been a small wound. Why did it hurt so much? It was as if the wound had suddenly exploded. Before they could look, Xiao Xian swung his arm again and the person retreated. Their target was the green-faced fanged beast and it had to be alive. This was the condition set by the Shi family in Rock Hill City. Therefore, they could be merciless when they attacked Xiao Xian, but they still had to be careful when facing the green-faced fanged beast. This way, they would appear to be restrained and would not be able to use too much force. Xiao Xian also saw their concerns and continued to use the green-faced fanged beast as a weapon. Seeing that Xiao Xian actually used such a method, the 2 people cursed in their hearts. The Yinjiao people were really scheming. If Xiao Xian knew what they were thinking, he would definitely scoff. A thief who specialized in stealing other people's work had the nerve to talk about other people? Moreover, this was no longer stealing, this was a blatant robbery. Even more despicable. I've worked so hard to find this one. Do you think it was easy? You want to steal my prey? The green-faced fanged beast was completely used by Xiao Xian as a meteor hammer. Rumble. 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 Buff. One of them couldn't dodge in time, and his shoulder was pierced by the fangs of the green-faced beast. Although he tried his best to dodge, the fangs still pierced him half a finger deep. He had clearly avoided his vital parts and it shouldn't have been a big wound. However, the moment he was stabbed, his shoulder seemed to have exploded from the inside. Amidst the green woods and grasses, glaring blood splattered onto the branches, grass and leaves, adding to the beauty of life and death in this verdant land. How could this be? It shouldn't be like this. Even if I was pricked, I shouldn't feel this way. It shouldn't be this painful. At this moment, the two of them did not plan to attack anymore. Instead, they retreated far away. They wanted to figure out what was going on first. Otherwise, they would not be able to feel at ease. Stealing the target was important, but it was not as important as their own lives. They didn't want to die here because of this thing, not even leaving behind a complete bone. Seeing the two of them retreat, Xiao Xian didn't continue fighting. He couldn't directly kill the two of them now. Besides, he had the green-faced Fang beast with him. He didn't know how Duo Kong and the others were doing, so it was better to run first. Pulling back the green-faced Fang beast, Xiao Xian grabbed the worm silk on its body and carried it away. After Xiao Xian left, the two people who had been vigilant looked at the wound on their body. The person who was scratched on the arm found that there was a 2-finger-wide wound on his arm. The wound was deeper than he thought. His bones weren't hurt, but this unexpected wound made him feel a sense of danger. The green-faced Fang beast's fangs were strange. If he didn't avoid it, his chest would have been pierced. He would have been lying on the ground. The other person stared blankly at his injured shoulder. He couldn't believe that it was just a simple stab. In the past, he had also been stabbed by people with knives or spears, but he had never encountered such a situation. There was a wound on his shoulder that was almost penetrated. Blood was constantly flowing out from the wound. His bones weren't damaged at all, and his shoulder blade was intact. However, this wound that almost penetrated his entire shoulder made his hair stand on end. An indescribable cold numbness spread from the wound to his entire arm. Even his uninjured bones were trembling. On the other side, Xiao Xian carried the green-faced Fang beast and found a place to rest. Since someone was chasing him, he couldn't go back the way he came. Fortunately, when he was chasing the green-faced Fang beast, he had already memorized the general route. Based on this, he could deduce the location of the cave. After resting for a while, Xiao Xian finally had time to check on the green-faced Fang beast. After being used like a meteor hammer by Xiao Xian for a while, the green-faced Fang beast's eyes still looked awake. However, the anger and murderous intent in its eyes were getting stronger. Its nostrils were constantly breathing out hot steam like steam from a boiling pot. The grass on the ground that was facing its nostrils quickly withered and its color changed. It was as if it was put into a hot pot. When Xiao Xian carried it over, he found that its body temperature was high. However, seeing that it was still awake, Xiao Xian didn't understand. Could this be the special characteristic of the green-faced Fang beast? Looking carefully, Xiao Xian found that the green-faced Fang beast's round belly seemed to have shrunk a little. Xiao Xian stretched out his hand and pulled on the worm's silk. He was sure that the green-faced Fang beast had indeed lost weight. It had only been less than half an hour since it was blocked in the cave. In such a short time, it had changed so much. If it had rushed into the cave with its current appearance, it might not have been blocked in the cave. Probably because the green-faced Fang beast felt that the worm's silk was loosening, it struggled to break free. Xiao Xian quickly tightened the worm's silk again. In addition to these changes, Xiao Xian also found that there was a wound on its face. It was probably caused by the two robbers before. The wound wasn't big, it wasn't even as long as Xiao Xian's pinky finger, and it wasn't bleeding profusely. A drop of green blood flowed out from the wound and was thrown out by the struggling green-faced Fang beast. Xiao Xian saw the drop of blood that was thrown out was like a light feather that slowly fell to the ground. It wasn't something that a normal drop of water or blood could do. Xiao Xian walked over and looked at the drop of light green blood on the grass. Tiny bubbles began to appear on the edges of the blood droplet. Then, as if the blood droplet had been dropped into a hot and dry pot, it began to bubble even more violently. The bubbles also grew bigger. The blood droplet, however, seemed to evaporate. It quickly became smaller until there was no trace of it left. Xiao Xian stared blankly at the leaf. He turned it over and looked at it again. If he hadn't seen the drop of blood being thrown out and dripping here with his own eyes, Xiao Xian would have doubted what had happened here. He used to wonder why there were so many fearsome beasts in the world, but only a few types of beast blood could be used to make weapons. Why couldn't other beasts do the same? Xiao Xian used to be stupid enough to try using the prey that the hunting team brought back. Now, it seemed that the fearsome beasts that were chosen to be used to make weapons had their own unique characteristics. The green-faced Fang beast was very light, Xiao Xian was sure of that. But he didn't expect their blood to be so light. It was also very strange. In just a few breaths, it evaporated without leaving a trace. The green-faced Fang beast that was tied up again was breathing out air. In front of it, all the grass in the range of its breath withered. Moreover, its body was still shrinking. Now it didn't look as round as it used to. The wound on its face had already scabbed and was recovering very quickly. Xiao Xian was guarding it. When he saw that it was almost done, he tightened the worm's silk again to prevent it from escaping. During the process, Xiao Xian also carefully avoided its fangs. When he saw the wounds on the two robbers, he knew that the fangs of the green-faced fanged beast were much more dangerous than he thought. When he thought about how he dared to grab it with his bare hands, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, he wasn't scratched by the fangs. The most lethal part of the beast was the fangs. If his hand was scratched, he didn't know what would have happened to his hand. No wonder the carcass of the beast that he saw that day was killed by the green-faced fanged beast's fangs. The fangs were strangely slippery, and the fangs had explosive lethality. It was indeed the strongest weapon of such a creature. Not to mention, it had incredible speed and a light body that could almost fly. It was definitely true that the most dangerous beast in this forest was the green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian was really lucky to be able to catch one so easily. If it hadn't eaten too much and was stuck at the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian wouldn't have been able to catch it without any injuries. When the green-faced fanged beast's torso had shrunk to half its original size, Xiao Xian tightened the worm's silk and carried it back. Taking a detour, Xiao Xian took a long detour and found traces of the Hui tribesmen. There was an eagle flying in the sky as if it was looking for something. Xiao Xian blew the wooden whistle in his mouth to attract the attention of the eagle in the sky. Seeing Xiao Xian, the man seemed to be relieved. Mai and Tu also heard the whistle and ran over from the forest. They were stopped by the Rock Hill City people. Some of them were injured, and one of the eagles couldn't fly because it was hit by an arrow, so they had already returned. They continued to look for Xiao Xian. Xiang Chen was injured. Duo Kong sent him back to the cave. Mai briefly told Xiao Xian what they encountered. "Are you okay?" Xiao Xian asked. "He's fine. It's not serious. He'll be fine after 2 days of rest. This is..." Mai looked at the green-faced fanged beast that Xiao Xian was carrying. His eyes were filled with anticipation, as if he had guessed something but wasn't sure. "Yes, that's it." Chapter 549. Knowing that Xiao Xian had caught the green-faced fanged beast, Mai and Tuo were so excited that their faces turned red. They couldn't wait to bring it back to their tribe to test if it really had magical properties. However, the other tribes wouldn't let the Yinjiao people go just like that. After all, they hadn't caught anything yet. Originally, Mai wanted the Hui tribe to bring Xiao Xian back. If they flew in the sky, it would be faster and there would be fewer obstacles. However, the giant mountain eagle didn't want to cooperate at all. As soon as Xiao Xian approached it with the green-faced fanged beast, it screamed and ran away. No matter how the Hui tribe tried to calm it down, it was useless. The giant mountain eagle had always been repulsed by this area. When it rested, it would fly to another place to rest. Now, it was even more repulsed by the green-faced fanged beast. In the end, Xiao Xian chose to go back with Mai and the others. On the way back, they met a group of people from Rock Hill City. However, Xiao Xian and the others didn't want to fight with them. They just wanted to bring the beast back to the cave as soon as possible. Therefore, they tried their best to avoid the group of people. They ran too fast and the group of slaves couldn't catch up to Xiao Xian and the others. Xiao Xian wrapped the green-faced fanged beast in leaves and vines, only exposing its nostrils and fangs. When the slaves saw this, they were only suspicious. They weren't sure, so they didn't chase after them. Ever since they came to this forest, the people from Rock Hill City and the tribesmen hadn't had any real conflicts. They were all saving their strength to look for the green-faced fanged beast. When Xiao Xian and the others went back to the cave, the slaves who went out to look for their target also went back. When the slaves returned to the village, they saw Shir sitting there with a gloomy face. His whole body was filled with an air of, "I'm not happy." None of the slaves dared to make a sound. They just stood there obediently with their heads down, waiting to be scolded. This was the norm for the past few days. "What did you find?" The veins on Shir's forehead bulged. His voice was as heavy as a heavy rock, about to crush anyone who heard it. The slaves, who stood there with their heads down, shrunk their necks and lowered their heads even more. Shir's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he scanned the group of people one by one. It was unclear if he was picking the first person to attack. On such a hot day, the tanned faces of the slaves standing there were full of sweat. When they became nervous, the sweat flowed faster. "Master, we met people from the tribe on our way back." The leader of the slaves braced himself under Shir's gaze and said, "There are people from the Hui tribe. As for the others, based on their totemic patterns, they should be from Yinjiao." As soon as they heard the name Yinjiao, The two men beside Shir raised their eyebrows. One of them was Robber 4 whom Shir had met before, and the other was Robber 7 who had just arrived. Shir stared at the slave for 2 seconds before slowly saying, "Continue." Although Shir didn't show any intense emotions, those who knew him well knew that if they couldn't move him with what they said, they would be punished. The slave stuttered as he told the story, including his own guesses. He then quickly looked at Shir's face. Seeing Shir's bright eyes and relaxed expression, he knew he did the right thing this time. He might even be rewarded. He couldn't help but be secretly happy. Sure enough, after Shir heard the story, he also felt that the Yinjiao man was carrying the green-faced fanged beast. After he said reward, he called for his men to come over. He planned to let the slaves continue their search in the area where the Yinjiao people were active. How was it? I was right? The ones who found the green-faced fanged beast first must be the Yinjiao people. Robber 7 jumped onto a wooden pile and sat down, crossing his legs. Robber 4 glanced at him. You told them everything? Hey, if I didn't tell them so much, they might not have found it. It's all thanks to me that they were able to get news so quickly. Robber 7 didn't think there was anything wrong with telling the Yinjiao people about the green-faced fanged beast. Instead, he thought he had done something good. If it was a difficult target, of course, it was better to let others do it for him. He was only responsible for stealing. Robber 4 was about to say something when he suddenly frowned. Even Robber 7, who was proud of himself, was stunned. The two of them quickly left Rock Hill City's stronghold. They heard the other robbers calling for them. It was the two robbers who wanted to steal Xiao Xian's prey. After they returned, they told the other robbers about what happened to prevent others from experiencing the same thing. Although they usually acted alone, it was impossible to get the green-faced fanged beast with just one or two of them. They could only work together. While the robbers and the people of Rock Hill City started to act, Xiao Xian's group of people were crowded in the cave. They looked at the green-faced fanged beast that Xiao Xian brought back with envy and confusion. Why did the people of Rock Hill City look for such a fearsome beast? Some people had the idea of stealing it, but when they thought about the fighting power of the Yinjiao people and the situation in the forest, they temporarily gave up on the idea. It was impossible for there to be only one green-faced fanged beast in such a large forest. After the others asked Xiao Xian, they decided to follow Xiao Xian's route and search for it. Of course, Xiao Xian had already reminded them of the things they needed to pay attention to when facing the green-faced fanged beast. Whether they listened or not was their own business. Xiao Xian couldn't do anything about it. Xiao Xian also knew that the people of Rock Hill City should have guessed what he brought back. When he hid the beast, he didn't really expect to fool them. He was just dealing with the situation at the time. The slaves would definitely report this to their slave masters. After the slave masters guessed, they would also take action. I don't know if the people of Rock Hill City will come and steal it, Mai said. I'll go add a few more traps to prevent them from sneaking up the mountain. However, to the surprise of the robbers and the tribesmen, the people of Rock Hill City didn't steal the green-faced fanged beast that Xiao Xian caught. Instead, they brought people to the place where Xiao Xian caught the beast. Surprisingly, they did encounter one nearby. However, the green-faced fanged beast was too fast. In the end, it went into a cave. Shir sent people in, but not long after they entered, they heard a scream and blood spurting out. After that, there was no more sound. Since he couldn't send anyone in, Shir ordered his men to release smoke. They burned a lot of grass that emitted a strong pungent smell at the entrance of the cave and blew it into the cave. But in the end, they still couldn't force it out. They didn't know if there were other caves. Since they couldn't catch it, Shir ordered people to set up many traps around the area. Not only on that mountain but also on the surrounding mountains. Xiao Xian had sneaked over to investigate before. Looking at the people of Rock Hill City, they were planning to go all out. Their goal wasn't one or two green-faced fanged beasts, but more. That was why they didn't steal the beasts from the tribesmen. Instead, they left people to make other arrangements. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of knocking echoed in the forest. Shir wanted to use the sound to force out the beasts hiding in the mountains. Shir had no other choice. The records left by his ancestors only said that green-faced fanged beasts weren't easy to catch, but they didn't say that they were hard to find. The only reason he set up camp there was to catch more. But now he couldn't even find one. If he kept searching like this, when could he go back? It had been almost 200 years since anyone came to catch them. Logically speaking, there should be more of them. Why couldn't he see them? Chapter 550. Even at night, the knocking sounds didn't stop. Xiao Xian and the others were resting on the mountain some distance away from where the people from Rock Hill City were knocking on the mountain. Even so, they could still hear the sounds coming from there. They don't even rest at night? What are they trying to do? A feather tribesman said. The feather tribesmen all lived in the trees outside the cave. Their hearing was good. Even the slightest sound at night could wake them up, not to mention the constant knocking sounds. Compared to the people outside the cave, the people sleeping inside the cave had it much better. They didn't know why, but tonight they felt that the cave was exceptionally quiet. Even the sounds of the insects moving below the cave were gone. The sounds from outside the cave were also reduced by a lot, so they couldn't hear as clearly as the people of the feather tribe. So when the feather tribesmen complained, there was a rare sound of snoring coming from the cave. The continuous large-scale search over the past few days had consumed a lot of their energy, but they didn't find anything. Everyone was exhausted. It was rare for them to have a quiet night, so they quickly fell asleep. The green-faced fanged beast caught by Xiao Xian also quieted down after it struggled to no avail. However, Xiao Xian could tell from its breathing that it wasn't asleep. It was just lying there quietly thinking about something. Lying on the ground, Xiao Xian listened to the knocking sounds outside. He didn't feel sleepy at all. The noise outside couldn't disturb his sleep. He couldn't sleep because he was restless. While everyone else was enjoying the rare silence, Xiao Xian felt like something was going to happen. Unable to sleep, Xiao Xian got up and walked out of the cave. Outside the cave, gusts of wind blew. In the surrounding forest, the leaves and grass rustled incessantly. This was something that had been heard for the past few days. However, tonight's rustling carried an indescribable sense of eeriness. Even Xiao Xian felt goosebumps all over his body when the wind blew on him. Could it be that the temperature dropped these few days? No, it couldn't be. The temperature was a little higher than 3 days ago. If they left this green forest and entered other parts of the fearsome beast forest, the temperature might be even higher. Although the nights in the mountains were cooler to the totemic warriors, it was like a summer night. They wouldn't get goosebumps from the wind. Another gust of wind blew. Rustle, rustle, the rustling of leaves and branches sounded again. Xiao Xian rubbed the goosebumps on his arms and stared at his surroundings. This feeling was too strange. What was it? They set up many traps at the foot of the mountain. If there were intruders or beasts attacking, they would have sounded the alarm. The 2,000 masked tribesmen who were responsible for the night watch looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. They didn't understand why this flaming horn tribesman didn't sleep at night. Nothing happened at the foot of the mountain? Xiao Xian asked the 2 night watchers. No. The one who spoke was a warrior from the 1,000 masked tribe called Feiyu. Xiao Xian had seen this person a long time ago. When Xiao Xian went out with the Pu tribe's expedition team, he had seen this person and had a short fight with him. Feiyu looked at Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian, did you notice something? He knew that the Yinjiao people were more sensitive to the changes in the forest than others. So, after hearing Xiao Xian's question, he asked. In the past, Feiyu dared to fight with Xiao Xian. But now he knew that he was no match for this man of the same age. They had indeed ignored the Yinjiao people during their trip to the desert. But now no one could ignore this tribe. Not yet. Be careful tonight. Pay attention to the movements at the foot of the mountain, said Xiao Xian. Hearing this, Feiyu and the other warrior from the 1,000 masked tribe trembled. This Yinjiao person definitely wouldn't say this for no reason. They didn't like the Yinjiao tribe, but they had to admit that in this forest, the Yinjiao people were indeed more sensitive than them. Since he said this, there must be a reason. The knocking sounds from afar did not stop. Just as Xiao Xian thought, the people from Rock Hill City seemed to be in a hurry. Why was this? Rock Hill City had already become the ruler of the desert. The tribesmen were no threat to them. They could still rule the desert safely. Why were they in a hurry to act? Was it to strengthen their position? Or was it to prepare for something else? Perhaps it wasn't just the tribesmen who felt a strange sense of danger. Even the ruler of the desert, Rock Hill City, was anxious. What did this weather anomaly mean? While Xiao Xian was looking around in confusion on a mountain in the distance. At night, the mountain was lit with fire and the white water moonstones glowed brightly. Shir brought 2/3 of his people over. He ordered the slaves to knock on the mountain in front of them non-stop. In the notes left by their ancestors, it was recorded that the green-faced fanged beasts liked to sleep in the grass, but preferred to nest in caves. Many times, there were even several beasts hiding in caves on the same mountain. This was where the green-faced fanged beast they were hunting was hiding. He wanted to use the knocking sounds to scare the green-faced fanged beast out. While they were knocking on the mountain, the traps were set up in other directions. No matter which direction the green-faced fanged beast came out, it would meet the people guarding there or the traps. Bang bang. As the hammers hit the mountain again and again, the rocks at the entrance of the cave flew everywhere. "Master, I think there's a sound," said a slave. Sure was resting with his eyes closed. The sound of the wind was like the howl of a beast in the night. It was also like a raging gust of wind. The grass around it was swaying in the same direction. In the face of such a sudden attack, Sure was able to dodge, but the slave standing there was not so lucky. He had already picked up his weapon and wanted to block the violent attack. Bang! A cloud of blood spurted out from the slave's arms holding the broadsword. Blood spurted out from every pore on his body. Under the bulging muscles, the veins and nerves were protruding as if they were going to jump out of his flesh. The slave who blocked the attack felt a numbing pain in his arms. He almost lost his grip on the broadsword. The gust of wind that followed this blow pulled the muscles on his face back, and the protruding bones made his entire face look strange. Catch it. Sure did not care about the slave. Seeing another green-faced fanged beast, he was even more delighted. He quickly ordered the slaves to catch it. Ah! A scream came from not far away. It was from the people who were lying in ambush on the other side of the mountain. Could it be there were more over there? Sure was getting more and more excited. Great, this time he might be able to bring back more green-faced fanged beasts. In the past, every time his ancestors came they only brought back 2 or 3. It was not enough, far from enough. Great, catch them all. I'll catch as many as they come. However, what happened next was beyond Sure's expectations. On the mountain, the sounds of the people lying in ambush from all 4 directions indicated that there were green-faced fanged beasts in the area. Not only that, the people at the foot of the mountain also blew their whistles. There were also whistles coming from the mountain next to them. What was going on? What the hell was going on? Why did they all appear at once? It was rare to see even one of them before. Did they knock on the mountain? Were these green-faced fanged beasts hibernating underground? But on such a hot day, how could they hibernate in winter? Chapter 551. It had to be said that what Sure thought was the truth. Green-faced fanged beasts were very punctual. They would hunt for food at night and find a comfortable bush to sleep in during the day. They were also very regular throughout the year. During the cold winter it would also snow in the forest. Green-faced fanged beasts did not like snow. They would hibernate like bears. In order to keep warm, they would squeeze into the same mountain and hibernate together. It was a rare time for them to gather together. They would only come out of their caves the following spring. In the past 2 years, even though the weather had changed strangely, there was no snow even though it was winter. Instead, it was extremely hot. Many animals in the forest had given up on the idea of hibernation. However, the green-faced fanged beasts did not. They still followed a fixed schedule. When the time came, no matter what the weather was like, they would squeeze into their caves and fall into a deep sleep. They would only come out to hunt when they were really hungry. This was why it was rare to see a green-faced fanged beast in the beginning. It was because they were hibernating. Only a few of them would come out of their caves and eat a few meals. When they felt that they had stocked up enough, they would return to their caves. The one Xiaoxian caught was the one that woke up hungry and came out to look for food. Because it wanted to store more energy to survive the rest of its hibernation, it ate a lot. If Xiaoxian didn't find it, it would continue to eat for 2 more days. After absorbing the energy, its body shrank back to its original size and it would enter the cave to hibernate again. At this time, most of the green-faced fanged beasts were actually hibernating in the caves in the mountains. Sure's knocking sound not only forced the green-faced fanged beast out of hiding, but it also woke up the other green-faced fanged beasts. To a certain extent, he did have the effect of knocking on the mountain. Unfortunately, the effect was too great, so he couldn't take it down easily. The green-faced fanged beasts that were awakened from their sleep had an even worse temper. The first thing it did when it came out was to hit the slave with its most violent attack ever since it woke up. There were hunting nets, but there were too many green-faced fanged beasts, so it was not easy to catch them. The continuous screams meant that the capture was not successful. It also meant that the number of green-faced fanged beasts that came out was far more than what Sure expected. Whoosh! A figure rushed straight over, and the slave who was pulling the hunting net had to pick up his weapon to deal with it. Crack! The sound of bones breaking was particularly harsh in the night. Although the slave had avoided the fangs, he was accidentally kicked by a hoof. The bait that was spread out gave the slaves hope and made them willing to pay the price for it. Other than here, there were also figures coming out from hidden caves in the nearby mountains. The hissing sound of their breathing told of their anger. In the dark night, the shadows of the trees merged into one. In the forest, on the grass, the figures were like whirlwinds, carrying a scorching hot aura. They ran on the grass without any intention of hiding. The green-faced fanged beast that hunted for food at night ran like the wind, barely making a sound. But now, these beasts that suddenly appeared were filled with rage, as if they wanted to cause a storm as they rushed down the mountain. The figures that rushed down from the mountains gathered in the valley and then rushed in the same direction. That was where Shir was running. The green-faced fanged beasts had their own roars. When they roared, it was more like the sound of the wind blowing. Perhaps others couldn't tell, but the green-faced fanged beasts sleeping on the other mountains could hear it. After waking up from their deep sleep, they were thinking of ways to vent their anger. They stabbed whoever they caught, even the beasts they met on the way to chase after Shir. You want to hide in the grass? Look at the teeth. Behind the trees? Look at the teeth. I'll stab you to death. There weren't any loud roars like the other beasts in the fearsome beast forest. When the roars of the green-faced fanged beasts gathered, it was like a gust of wind whistling through the forest. The leaves in the forest trembled with the sound, and the grass on the mountain was like a huge rock being thrown into a lake, creating countless waves, wave after wave, one after the other. At night, the forest seemed to have entered a deep and serene world. A violent wind disturbed the tranquility of the night. On the mountain where the tribesmen rested, Xian felt goosebumps all over his body again. Do you guys hear something? Xian asked the 2,000 masks on night watch. I think so. Is it the Rock Hill City people shouting? One of them asked. No, not that. It's the sound of the wind. No, it's something that sounds like the wind. Wind? Xian's words made the 2,000 masks even more confused. Was there something wrong with the sound of the wind? Whoosh, there was also a sound that sounded like the wind blowing in the cave. The three of them looked at the cave at the same time. Is it that? The 1,000 masks pointed at the cave and asked Xian. Xian looked at the cave. That sound, if he listened carefully, was different from the sound of the wind. He had heard it before. It was actually made by the green-faced fanged beasts, but it wasn't easy to tell from a distance. Looking at the mountains in the distance again, Xian listened carefully to the sound of the wind. Then he quickly took out a wooden whistle and blew it. The shrill whistle broke the silence of the night. Whether it was the people snoring in the cave or the people sleeping on the trees outside, they were all awakened by the whistle. What's wrong? What happened? Who blew the whistle? Shadows quickly gathered at the place where the whistle came from. Seeing the person standing there with the wooden whistle in his hand, Duokong asked, Xian, what happened? Yeah, what happened? Why is the whistle so urgent? A yawning 8-limbed tribesman asked. Xian looked at the forest in the distance and said, If I'm not wrong, your prey is here. Everyone was shocked and asked quickly. Prey is here? You mean the green-faced fanged beasts? That's a good thing. How many? Are there enough to share? If there weren't enough, they would have to fight for it. Xian took a deep breath. A lot. Chapter 552. Xian's words made the people of several tribes go wild with joy. They came all the way to this dangerous place just to find the green-faced fanged beast. No matter what it was used for, they had to get what the slave masters were trying so hard to find. When they saw the Yinjiao people catch one yesterday, many of them were jealous. Now their chance was finally here. Stretching their arms and legs, everyone listened carefully. They only heard the screams of people in the distance and the occasional roar of beasts. These were all beasts they had seen in this forest before. They weren't catching the target, and there were also the sounds of trees breaking. Other than that, there was nothing else. Listen to the sound of the wind. It sounds like a gust of wind. It's the roar of the green-faced fanged beast, Xian explained to everyone. No wonder. I was wondering why the wind was so loud, but it didn't blow. The Mang tribesmen smirked. After confirming that Xian wasn't lying, they all rubbed their palms and prepared for a big fight. Since there's so much prey, there's no need to focus on one place, Jianghu of the 8-limbed tribe said. That's right. Let's rely on our own abilities, Muyu of the Longboat tribe agreed. If they all huddled together, there might be fights. Therefore, the best way was to act separately. Each tribe would hunt on their own. Whatever they caught would belong to them so as to avoid more disputes. Plus, when they were alone, they didn't have to worry about anything. They could do whatever they wanted. The other tribes expressed their thoughts, while the Yinjiao people looked at Xiao Xian. They had to listen to Xiao Xian on this trip. Xiao Xian gestured for them to calm down, then said to the happy tribes, "There is indeed a lot of prey, but that's not necessarily a good thing. At the same time, I have to remind everyone that the green-faced fang beast isn't that easy to catch. I've already told everyone what to pay attention to. Be careful. Don't complain when you suffer heavy losses. Don't worry, we won't blame you. On the contrary, we have to thank Elder Xiao Xian for reminding us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known where the prey was." Guji of the Feather Tribe smiled. They were now focused on how to catch the green-faced fang beast. Although they listened to Xiao Xian's reminder, they didn't think it was that scary. Ever since they entered the fearsome beast forest, they had encountered all kinds of beasts in the forest. The green-faced fang beast that Xiao Xian caught didn't seem that strong. He had finished what he wanted to say. Xiao Xian couldn't care less about what others thought of him. All the tribes had already started to prepare. Although it was still night time, the enthusiasm to catch the green-faced fang beasts was still high. Everyone held the water moonstone and used the light to chop trees and weave vines. The Eight Limbs people had already started to weave spider silk. The wind was getting closer. Xiao Xian could clearly hear the shouts of the Rock Hill City people. "We're almost at the foot of the mountain," Xiao Xian said. After hearing Xiao Xian say that the sound of the wind was the roar of the green-faced fang beast, they could tell that it was the roar of the beast. They brought the tools they had prepared and rushed down the mountain. After 3 breaths, there were only 5 people from Yinjiao and a few people from the Hui tribe left in front of the cave. The Hui tribe's giant mountain eagle wasn't good at hunting at night. They didn't plan to summon it for now. Since there were many targets, they weren't in a hurry. It wouldn't be too late to summon it when the sun was about to rise. Besides, the Yinjiao people weren't in a hurry, so they didn't need to rush. "Xian, what do you plan to do?" Mai asked while holding the net. "There are too many green-faced fang beasts. They're chasing the people from Rock Hill City. This place is close to Rock Hill City, so there will definitely be a few coming up the mountain. Let's try to catch a few first. We don't need to watch the big group." Xiao Xian checked the traps they set up on the mountain and made some changes. Then he arranged the operation. The grass that the green-faced fang beasts liked to eat was hard to find here. It was too dark to search for it in the bushes. They didn't have a beast sense of smell, so they had to find another way. If they couldn't use grass as bait, then they had to use humans. Luring prey into a trap was something that hunters often did. After Xiao Xian told the other 4 about his experience in catching green-faced fang beasts, they started to act. The green-faced fang beasts rushed to the foot of the mountain. They didn't seem to have any intention of stopping as they chased after the people from Rock Hill City. However, some of the green-faced fang beasts on the side of the team would pay attention to the movements around them. Xiao Xian had warned the tribesmen that the green-faced fang beasts could easily detect movements in their surroundings, so they had to be extra careful. It was best to wait for the beasts to leave before attacking. Otherwise, they might lead the beasts to their own mountains. That would help the people of Rock Hill City and help them avoid this crisis. Although they had been told by Xiao Xian that there were many green-faced fang beasts coming, the tribesmen still trembled when they saw them when they went down the mountain. In the dark, they couldn't see what was running over there. They could only hear the sound of wind blowing past, like a constant gust of wind. The rustling of leaves covered the sound of the tribesmen's arrival. They hid in the bushes, branches and other places, quietly observing the situation. Those green-faced fang beasts were indeed running towards Rock Hill City. A few green-faced fang beasts on the side of the team seemed to have noticed something and suddenly rushed out of the team towards them. The nearest 8 Limbs tribesman cursed in his heart. He thought he was exposed, but when he saw that the green-faced fang beast was only chasing after something that looked like a mouse, he sighed in relief. However, he let out a sigh of relief too early. He only heard a bang as if something had pierced into a tree trunk, followed by a crisp cracking sound. The tree he was hiding in was knocked down. Many of the green-faced fang beasts looked at the fallen tree, but seeing that there was nothing interesting to vent their anger on, they continued to charge forward with the rest of the team. The person who was hiding in the fallen tree didn't fall with the tree. His foot was hooked on a very thin wire, and his whole body seemed to be attached to the wire. If you didn't see him, you wouldn't have noticed that there was someone else there. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, a very soft sound was heard, but it was covered by the rustling of leaves. A large net was quietly woven. It was made by 5 8 Limbs tribesmen who were hiding in different places. At this moment, the net was silently closing in on the green-faced fang beast that had left the team. In the night, 6 nocturnal birds cooed and rested on a nearby tree. The green-faced fanged beasts didn't pay attention to them as they were flying in the sky. They couldn't do anything about it, nor were they interested. Another cooing sound was heard, but it didn't come from the birds. It came from the forest not far away. After hearing the sound, the 6 nocturnal birds flew over. Not long after, the 6 birds flew over again. However, it was different from before. Their claws were grabbing onto a vine. The 6 birds were grabbing onto the 6 corners of a net. Coo coo coo. The sound from the forest was like a guide. The 6 birds holding onto the net flew towards another green-faced fanged beast that had left the group and was attacking the wild beasts in the bushes. These 6 birds weren't really tamed. The feather tribesmen used their tribe's secret technique to instruct them. The 6 birds couldn't carry out effective tasks on their own. They could only instruct them bit by bit through their voices, telling them what to do. Other than the 8 Limbs tribe and the Feather tribe, the 1,000 Masks tribe, the Mang tribe, and the Longboat tribe all used their own methods and techniques to attack the green-faced fanged beasts. The green-faced fanged beasts group had already passed by. Xiao Xian led the last few beasts to the mountain, and then separated them with a few others. They lured them one by one to the traps set up. Gula and the others from the Hui tribe helped from the side. If it was just one green-faced fanged beast, it would be fine. As long as they understood their temperament and behavior, the plan would succeed. If there were too many of them, there would be too many variables. Not only would the plan fail, but everyone would also be in danger. A green-faced fanged beast that stepped into the trap struggled hard, trying to use its fangs to poke away all the vines around it. Xiao Xian and Gula jumped down from the trees on both sides. They quickly went over and tied the beast up with vines. The air around the beast's fangs vibrated at a strange frequency, making a whistling sound. It was howling, venting its anger. The hot air coming out of its nostrils was hotter than boiling water. Even though Xiao Xian and Gula had already moved away, they could still clearly feel the rising temperature around them. The air around the green-faced fanged beast was like a runaway horse, jumping around without any pattern. It was not reliable to just tie it up, and no one knew how long it would last. After tying it up, Xiao Xian took out a few polished bronze needles that were smeared with poison. He had already made these needles before he came here. He smeared some of the poison he collected from some plants in the forest and injected the green-faced fanged beast with a needle. That kind of poison had the effect of making large beasts faint. Some beasts with poor resistance to poison might even die from eating that kind of plant. Xiao Xian did not know if this would work on the green-faced fanged beast, so he brought a few needles this time. If one didn't work, he injected another one. The last time he was looking for the green-faced fanged beast, he did not use this. This time he planned to give it a try. After injecting 3 needles, the green-faced fanged beast's movements slowed down. The frequency of its nostrils also decreased, and the air around it seemed to have stopped moving. 3 to 5 needles, no more. Xiao Xian said as he looked at the green-faced fanged beast that was struggling slower and slower. After that, Xiao Xian caught another green-faced fanged beast that fell into the trap. Before they took the bait, they might be very difficult to catch as they were fast and not easy to chase. However, once they stepped into the trap, they would be quickly tied up by the people lying in ambush. After 3 to 5 needles, they would be obedient. Chapter 553. Under the darkness of the night, fights were happening everywhere. Sometimes you could hear people screaming, and sometimes you could hear the sounds of collisions. Xiao Xian tied up the 3rd green-faced fanged beast he caught that night and injected it with 3 needles. When it stopped struggling, he blew the wooden whistle. Not long after, Duo Kong, Mai and the others came over. The few people from the Hui tribe also came over. "How are you? Are you hurt?" Xiao Xian smelled blood. The green-faced fanged beast's blood didn't have such a bloody smell, so it could only be human blood. "It's nothing, just a small wound." Duo Kong raised his arm. There was a wound about the length of a thumb on his arm, but it looked like he was scratched by a beast. The wound was about 3 fingers wide, and he had already applied some herbs and wrapped it up with a piece of linen. This was just a graze from the fanged beast's teeth. If it were any other beast's fangs, the wound would only be a scratch. To a certain extent, it was a small wound. Other than Duo Kong, Mai Tua and Xiang Chen all had some wounds on their bodies. The Hui tribe also had wounds. The one with the heaviest injuries was stabbed in the stomach. If Duo Kong hadn't pulled him back in time, he would have been scratched by the beast's fangs instead of being stabbed. The wound on his stomach would have been a big bloody hole and he would have died. The Hui tribe's elder He Shi was very grateful. He secretly decided that he would continue working with Yanjiao in the future. When they returned, he would send someone to thank them. As expected, compared to the other tribes, Yanjiao was more reliable. We each caught 1 and Duo Kong caught 2, Mai said. The 4 of them caught 5 and Xiao Xian caught 3. Including the one in the cave, they had 9 in total. Xiao Xian, do we continue? Duo Kong rubbed his hands. He was still itching. There were so many green-faced fanged beasts, it would be a waste not to catch them. No, let's get ready to leave, Xiao Xian said. You're leaving so soon? Duo Kong was reluctant. Let's take advantage of the fact that the green-faced fanged beasts are distracted by the people from Rock Hill City to escape. Otherwise, it'll be hard for us to escape once they regain their senses. Don't be greedy. Xiao Xian's sense of crisis did not disappear. What if the group of green-faced fanged beasts turned around and targeted them? In order to escape, the people from Rock Hill City might have lured the green-faced fanged beast here. Duo Kong thought about it and agreed. There was no need to rush. After all, this was still the fearsome beast forest. If they wanted to come back in the future, it would be fine. Their tribe was at the edge of the fearsome beast forest. Compared to other tribes, it was closer. They could just treat it as a hunting trip. Alright then, let's hurry up and leave. Don't let those people from Rock Hill City plot against us. Slave masters are very treacherous. After thinking it through, Duo Kong couldn't wait to go back and try to forge weapons with these green-faced fanged beasts. He was very wary of the slave masters. Who let the slave masters on the other side of the sea be a big force. Although the slave masters' territory was only in the desert, they were still slave masters. He had to be careful. Signaling Gula to blow a whistle to inform the other tribes, Xiao Xian went back to the cave to bring out the first green-faced fanged beast he caught. He injected it with 3 needles to wake it up. He didn't know if they would attract the group of green-faced fanged beasts when they left. It was too risky. What, no one is here yet? When Xiao Xian went down the mountain, he didn't see anyone else. There was nothing else important in the cave. Everyone could just grab their prey and leave. But now, Gula had already blown the whistle to gather and leave. Did those people not hear it, or did they not want to leave the prey in front of them? I'll blow it again. Gule's expression was ugly as he blew the whistle again. They had cooperated with the other tribes for so many years. They knew how to communicate with each other and what the whistle meant. It was understandable if they couldn't return because of the situation. But in such a big place, how could they not return even if they didn't hear the whistle? At this moment, a series of nocturnal bird whistles came from somewhere in the forest. It's the Feather Tribe. They don't want to leave immediately. They asked us to wait. Gula frowned. Tell them either they come here immediately and we leave together, or they continue to catch beasts here and we leave now. Xiao Xian said. Gula did as he was told. But when he returned, the other party didn't want to leave immediately. Let them be. Let's go. Xiao Xian said and let Gula whistle back. Soon there was a short whistle in reply. They agreed. Gula didn't understand. Wasn't it just the green-faced fanged beasts? Why did they stay here and not leave? Why were they so greedy? Xiao Xian also felt that this wasn't their style. Unless they knew something and knew the importance of the green-faced fanged beasts. Metal that wasn't in a molten state wouldn't change when it came in contact with the blood of the green-faced fanged beasts. Those people couldn't have discovered it because of this. Thinking about this, Xiao Xian's eyebrows twitched. The Rock Hill City people. Unless the Rock Hill City people took the initiative to tell them the secret, so that the tribesmen could continue to hold back the beasts here. Maybe they already know the secret of the green-faced fanged beasts. Xiao Xian said. What secret? The Hui tribesmen looked at Xiao Xian. What's the use of the green-faced fanged beasts? This was something they didn't understand. Sure brought some of the slaves and the remaining 8 beasts down the mountain in a hurry. The sky was still dark and the smell of blood could still be smelled. There were also some sizzling sounds. The blood of the beast that had been cut down made a steaming sound. In the end, there were only bones and teeth left. The once strongest weapon had lost its power with the death of the green-faced fanged beast. Its long fangs had turned into ordinary fangs without any special features. However, compared to the number of beasts that died, the number of slaves from Rock Hill City was much higher. When they arrived, there were close to 400 people. Now, only a little more than 100 left with Sure. Close to 200 people died in the sudden attack of the beast. Screams of agony could still be heard even now. But Sure didn't care. The prey he brought back was more important. It was a pity that he didn't bring enough people. If he knew this would happen, he would have brought more people. 3 of his beasts were stolen. Sure was unhappy, but when he thought about how he sent people to lure the beasts to the tribesmen, he was happy. Let the tribesmen have a taste of what it felt like to be attacked by the beasts. Trying to take advantage of the chaos? No way. Chapter 554. Xiao Xian and his group left the area surrounded by mountains in the dark of night. They only slowed down when they were truly out of the area. I'll go up and take a look. Xiao Xian threw the unconscious prey to Duo Kong and the others, then jumped up a tree. There were more towering ancient trees in the surroundings, and more birds were resting in the forest at night. Because of Xiao Xian's movement, the birds chirped a few times in dissatisfaction. There were other nocturnal beasts moving around, and in the distance, there were constant roars and fights between beasts. This was the real, normal, fearsome beast mountain forest. The green-faced fanged beasts probably wouldn't leave their precious land, so when they heard the sounds of fighting, both the Yinjiao and Hui tribesmen breathed a sigh of relief. If there were other beasts moving around, it meant that they were no longer in the green-faced fanged beasts' territory. Xiao Xian came to the top of the tree and looked at the forest in the distance. He couldn't see the green color of the forest in the dark, but he could hear the whistling of the wind. The birds in the nests in the tree seemed to be uneasy with the sound and made a few low cries. When Xiao Xian came down from the tree, the Hui tribesmen were still regretting that they didn't catch more green-faced fanged beasts. But since they were already out, they wouldn't go back. Yinjiao caught a total of 9 green-faced fanged beasts. They would give 2 to the Hui tribe. This wasn't because Yinjiao was stingy. When they were catching the green-faced fanged beasts, the ones who made the decision were the Yinjiao tribesmen. The Hui tribesmen were only there to help. Of the 3 giant mountain eagles, 1 was injured, 1 wasn't used to the environment and was listless, and the last one was not willing to cooperate at all. Their contribution was limited. Giving 2 to the Hui tribe was already a fair deal. The Hui tribesmen also understood this, so they didn't have any objections. They just regretted that they didn't catch more. Who would have thought that the green-faced fanged beasts that lived in the depths of the fearsome beast mountain forest would be useful for metalware? However, since they were sure that the green-faced fanged beasts were here, and they were the first tribe to openly cooperate with Yinjiao, they believed that there would be opportunities in the future. The Yinjiao people would definitely go there again, and at that time they could send more people with them. Thinking of this, the people of the Hui tribe felt very lucky. Indeed, cooperating with Yinjiao was the right choice. Xiao Xian, why don't we wait here? He of the Hui tribe suggested, but his words were hesitant and cautious. As he spoke, he carefully observed the movements of Xiao Xian. It was dark now, so he couldn't see the expression on Xiao Xian's face. He could only guess from his breathing and movements. Sure. Xiao Xian didn't plan to leave now. The fearsome beast mountain forest was dangerous at night. He was fine, but the others' night vision was far worse than in the daytime. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it wasn't a good idea to travel at night. They didn't dare to take out the water moonstones now because it would attract insects and beasts. They could only find a place to hide and wait quietly. There seemed to be voices in the distance, but it wasn't the voices of the tribesmen. It should be Shi's group. They were going in a different direction from Xiao Xian, so they wouldn't meet for the time being. After waiting for a while, there was still no movement from the others. She blew the wooden whistle, but there was still no response. The dark sky began to lighten, and the day was approaching. Whoosh, whoosh. Not far away, there was the sound of leaves swaying as if something was running past. What's that? I whispered. The group was on alert. Whoosh. A figure quickly passed by, and the flowers that were taller than a person swayed violently. I'll go take a look. Duo Kong picked up his axe and was about to walk over. Wait. Xiao Xian stopped Duo Kong. Don't go over, guard our prey. After Xiao Xian said that, the Yinjiao tribesmen understood that it wasn't a beast lurking in the night, but someone else who wanted to steal their prey. Someone from Rock Hill City? Behind Xiao Xian, 4 Yinjiao tribesmen formed an arc to protect the 9 prey. On the other side of the prey were the Hui tribesmen. They formed a defensive circle, trapping the prey in the middle. Whoosh. The figure that was originally hiding in the forest suddenly rushed out, like a venomous snake staring coldly at its prey. It headed in the direction of Xiao Xian and the others, snaking like lightning. Its steps looked like it was gliding on the grass. Robbers? This didn't seem like the style of the people from Rock Hill City. The slaves didn't have such special abilities, and after eliminating the people from Rock Hill City, the most likely identity was that of a robber. Duo Kong and the others clenched their weapons, and the totemic power in their bodies increased instantly. Their muscles tightened and they felt as hard as rocks. Their totemic power surged wildly, and their bones couldn't help but creak as they were ready to attack. What did the tribesmen hate the most? It was when their prey was targeted by others. They would definitely be ruthless and kill whoever they saw. However, just as Duo Kong and the rest were staring at the figure that rushed out, another figure suddenly appeared on the other side. This figure came from a completely different direction from the first one, and the timing he chose was right when everyone's attention was on the first figure. Unlike the first one, who had a murderous aura, the second one was more stealthy, like a feather that suddenly floated over. It was silent, but it was faster than a feather. The second figure leaped out. Both of his feet touched the ground continuously, but he seemed to be floating lightly, like a mayfly in the water. Every time he touched the ground he would move several meters away. One moment he was still there, and the next moment he had already disappeared from his original position and appeared in another place. Therefore, when everyone's attention was focused on the first figure, the second figure approached from the other side like a ghost. The people of the Hui tribe who were guarding the other side didn't have time to react. Gu La, who reacted the fastest, waved his stone sword and slashed at the approaching figure. The other people of the Hui tribe followed closely behind. However, the other person was able to find a breakthrough in an instant. Under the siege of swords, axes and spears, he broke into the circle of guards. There were 9 poison green-faced fanged beasts lying in a daze. Just as the black figure reached out to grab the nearest green-faced fanged beast, 3 spear darts whistled through the air and pierced towards him. The black figure had no choice but to move his hand away, but he didn't retract it. He pushed his palm against the ground and somersaulted in the air, jumping over the 3 spear darts. He wanted to attack again, but Xiao Xian's sword was already slashing towards him. Robber 7. You're looking for death. Xiao Xian shouted. Robber 7? It's him? It's the robber they caught and released. He still dared to come and steal Yanjiao's prey. Duo Kong and the others were furious. They should have broken his neck instead of agreeing to his deal. Robber 7, who was recognized, didn't feel embarrassed at all. He didn't even stop moving, and his thoughts of stealing prey didn't change at all. So what if they recognized me? I'm here to steal Yanjiao's prey. However, because of Xiao Xian's obstruction, the others had already reacted, and Robber 7 didn't have a chance to make his move. The person who appeared before was also blocked, and couldn't break into the defense circle to take the prey away. If the first time didn't work, then he would retreat and look for another chance. Robber 7 and his companions had the same idea. They were good at surprise attacks and didn't want to wait for the other party to react and force their way in. Reluctantly, Robber 7 retreated from the tribesmen's defense circle and planned to escape first. However, Xiao Xian had another idea. They couldn't let them go. Robbers' actions were hard to guard against. They already had to guard against the dangers that lurked everywhere in the fearsome beast forest. Were they going to have to spare some effort to guard against robbers in the future? Even if there were other robbers who wanted to steal their prey in the future, these two, especially Robber 7, couldn't be let go. Chapter 555. The totemic power in Xiao Xian's body surged wildly, spreading to every part of his body, pouring into every muscle and every bone. His powerful foot stomped on the ground with a loud bang, as if a giant beast had stomped on the ground, causing the ground nearby to tremble. Using the recoil force, Xiao Xian leaped forward. With just one step, he was already behind Robber 7, who had just escaped from the circle of guards and was about to sneak away. The broad blade cut through the airflow in front of it as if it was tearing through cloth, producing a whistling sound. The ferocious sword aura slashed towards Robber 7. Robber 7 felt as if the air around him was filled with ice water, chilling him to the bone. Feeling the approaching aura, a thought flashed through his mind. Damn it! It's that bastard. Robber 7's mind flashed back to the time when he was stealing cabbages and was sent flying. His body tensed up and his movements froze for a moment. Then he did a somersault in the air like a fish swinging its tail in the water. His body twisted strangely, causing the air to swirl and form a whirlpool. Robber 7 wanted to use the swirling airflow to help him make a sudden turn in the air. However, the blade that was closing in quickly seemed to have enveloped the entire area. It's the same thing again. It's the same thing again. It was the same last time and it's the same this time. This feeling was too similar to the last time he was sent flying. No, it was even stronger than the last time. The murderous aura was too strong, causing Robber Seven's hair to stand on end. He tried his best to dodge, but another voice in his mind told him that he couldn't. Even if he tried, he would lose an arm. If he didn't want to lose an arm, he could only take it head-on. Clang. There was no sound of flesh being cut, but the sound of metal colliding with metal. It was ear-piercing. Following the explosion, Robber Seven was sent flying like a baseball, crashing into a large tree not far away that even 10 people couldn't wrap their arms around. Crack. The crisp sound of something breaking rang out. It was extremely clear in the night, startling countless wild birds that were resting in the night. The thick tree was directly broken, splinters of wood flew everywhere, and many branches and leaves fell from the tree. The person who broke the tree spat out a mouthful of blood. Robber 6. Robber 7 felt the excruciating pain all over his body. He knew that he couldn't escape Xiao Xian's pursuit with his own strength, so he could only ask for help. Robber 6, who was about to escape, cursed under his breath. His body twisted like a snake as he avoided Duo Kang's axe and headed towards Robber 7. His speed was even faster than before and Duo Kang couldn't catch up. Robber 6 dashed towards Robber 7 and leaped out before Xiao Xian could finish him off. Like an eagle gliding across water, Robber 6 grabbed Robber 7 and fled into the forest. Robber 6 purposely squeezed his way through the dense foliage. Even though it was a narrow space filled with shrubs, Robber 6 was always able to find the most suitable escape route. If Xiao Xian chased after him, he might not be able to keep up with him. Everyone had their own specializations and Robber 6 was an expert in this field. At this moment he was like a mouse scurrying into a thorny undergrowth, turning left and dodging right, trying to avoid the predator that was chasing after him. This was also the reason why Robber 6 dared to make a move here. He knew that even if this operation failed, he could still use his advantage to shake off the tribesmen. He was confident that with the right time and place and his own talents, which tribesmen could catch up to him. Even if bringing Robber 7 would slow him down, so what? Robber 6 snorted. I'm so strong, even if I bring along a burden, I can still shake off the tribesmen. This was the common problem of robbers. They were overconfident, arrogant, even conceited. Knowing that it was disadvantageous for him, Xiao Xian didn't follow him in and instead changed his method. Xiao Xian sheathed his sword into the animal skin sheath. The hand that wasn't holding the sword clenched into a fist. He bent his knees and stomped on the ground, leaping up. His entire arm sped up like a rocket that had been installed with a propeller. His target wasn't the two in front of him, but the fallen tree that Robber 7 crashed into. His fist moved his arm and plunged into the thick tree trunk. Because this punch was too fast, it was like a thrown spear. The tree trunk wasn't split apart, and Xiao Xian's entire arm was buried in the tree trunk. After his arm went in, Xiao Xian didn't stop. He exerted force on his feet again, and the grass and thick soil on the ground exploded outwards. Xiao Xian had already jumped up and at the same time, his arms grabbed onto the thick tree trunk. Although his arms were so small compared to the tree that even 10 people couldn't wrap their arms around, the tree moved with Xiao Xian's movements. The few people from the Hui tribe guarding the green-faced fang beasts couldn't see the situation clearly, but they could guess what was happening with their ears. Moreover, the sky was starting to lighten, and they could see the huge shadow of the swaying tree under the sky. It was because they could see and guess that they were shocked beyond words. They knew that the Yinjiao people were strong and when they were angry they were fierce. These days they thought they understood the Yinjiao people, but at this moment they felt that they still underestimated them. On the other side, the towering ancient tree with countless branches and leaves was lifted up like a huge broom, and then slammed down heavily into the forest. In the night before dawn, under the sky, there was an unconcealable ferocious aura, as if no other aura could suppress it. Robber 6 and Robber 7, who were escaping in the dense undergrowth, suddenly looked up. Although there were dense branches and leaves of various flowers and trees above them, and intertwined vines of different thicknesses that blocked their vision and interfered with their senses at this moment, they felt something pressing down from above. The pressure was so strange that it made their scalps numb, and it was like a cold electric current that rushed straight to their heads. Look, cough, watch the road. Robber 7 coughed up blood and reminded Robber 6. When they were looking at the sky just now, they almost crashed into the bushes in front of them. Robber 7's body was already scratched by the branches in the bushes, and his hair was messy. The pain of broken bones in many parts of his body was constantly attacking him. This feeling was too overwhelming. I know. How much do you? Before Robber 6 could finish his sentence, a huge boom came from above, drowning out all his words. Boom, the huge ancient tree was slammed down. Although there were other trees in the forest, and it couldn't directly hit the ground, after the trees collided with each other, countless branches were broken. Thick and thin they fell down one after another. In the bushes in front of Robber 7, a few branches that were thicker than a person fell down, and they almost crashed into them before they could react. The surrounding broken branches and fruits fell down like a storm. Where could they hide with their light bodies? Chapter 556. The sound of the huge ancient tree smashing into the forest reverberated through the forest, spreading far and wide. Two beasts that were fighting for food were frightened by the commotion. They no longer cared about the prey on the ground and scanned their surroundings in fear. Their ears drooped and they ran away with their tails between their legs. There were very few giant beasts in this area. After all, this was close to the green-faced fanged beasts' territory. Usually there would be a few overbearing giant beasts in this area. Most of them were normal beasts or wild beasts that wandered around looking for food. Therefore, Xiaoxian's commotion wouldn't attract the giant beasts but would only scare them away. The small beasts hiding in the forest ran away in panic. The already crowded short forest became even narrower. The humid and stuffy air seemed to have become restless. Sometimes, the escaping beasts would even bump into each other, not to mention Robber 6 and Robber 7 who were bigger than them. It was even harder to move around freely. After being hit by the tree trunk, Robber 6 decided to find a place to hide. It wasn't easy to avoid the falling tree trunk and fight for space with the beasts. There was even a lynx that bared its fangs at him just now. If it was any other time he would have killed it. Now that he had to carry Robber 7 and escape, he didn't have the time to deal with the small beasts that bared their fangs at him. After the falling tree trunk stopped, Robber 6 decided to move again. However, before he could move his feet, he heard another crack sound. It was very similar to the sound of Robber 7 crashing into the tree. The air pressure above his head suddenly increased. Again. Quick, quick, quick. That kid is going to smash it again. Robber 7 exclaimed. Shut up. Robber 6 didn't expect the Yinjiao people to use such a method to deal with him. He knew that the Yinjiao people were strong, but the current situation was completely out of his control. It was beyond his expectations. Was it a human or a giant beast that could smash such a thick tree trunk? Boom. Another loud noise. In the surrounding forest, a large number of broken tree branches fell. Robber 6's planned escape route was completely destroyed. The bushes, flowers and grass were already piled up messily by tree branches. It was extremely messy. More than half of the branches and leaves covering the sky were broken. If it was daytime, Robber 6 and the rest would be exposed to Yangguang. Fortunately, it was nighttime. Robber 6 encouraged himself and leaped out of the forest. Since he couldn't sneak through the dense forest, he could only step on the broken branches and branches to escape. However, before he could run a few steps, another tree came crashing down from above. The tree trunk was long with many branches and dense foliage. When it crashed down, the impact was too wide. Robber 6 couldn't escape in time. He could only rely on his hearing to determine what was falling from above. Then, his body would react accordingly. Not only was the giant tree smashing down powerful, it was also ferocious and accurate. No matter where Robber 6 ran to, the falling tree would always cover him. If it wasn't for the surrounding trees, he would have been smashed to death. Didn't they say that tribesmen couldn't see clearly at night? Robber 6 awkwardly dodged the falling branches and leaves. He didn't even bother to wipe away the bird droppings on his head. That kid can see. Robber 7 endured the pain all over his body and squeezed the words out from between his teeth. Of all the people you could have provoked, why did you have to provoke this kind of person? Robber 6 roared. Like the others, he left the green-faced fanged beast's territory when he realized the situation wasn't good. He didn't expect to see the Yinjiao and Hui tribesmen as soon as he came out. They even brought a few green-faced fanged beasts with them. Robber 6 thought that this was a rare opportunity. If he didn't steal it, he would feel sorry for himself. However, he was still too weak and it was too risky. If he wanted to make a move, he would have to wait for another opportunity. But who knew when the next opportunity would come? He wasn't willing to give up just like that. At this moment, Robber 7 appeared and said that the two of them should work together to steal a few green-faced fanged beasts. Robber 6 thought about it and agreed. The surrounding environment was very advantageous to him and he had Robber 7 to share the risk. Why not? But who would have thought that things would turn out like this? If he knew this would happen, he would have waited a little longer or robbed other tribesmen. He regretted it. Robber 7, Don't call me the next time you steal from the Yanjiao. Robber 6 had been a thief for many years, but he had never been chased so hard before. He regretted it. He should have asked for more information. Robber 7 wanted to say something, but he choked on the blood that gushed out from his throat. He thought to himself, "Don't talk about you, I won't do it again." That was too scary. Robber 6 was almost hit by a broken branch from above. He quickly dodged to the side and his forehead slipped from the broken branch. Blood spilled out from his wound as he ran, splashing onto the bushes. This won't do. As the saying goes, a dead Taoist is better than a dead Taoist. It is too difficult to carry a burden. It is better to throw this burden away. Robber 6 loosened his grip on Robber 7. He wanted to throw Robber 7 down so that he could run faster and have a better chance of escaping. However, Robber 7 seemed to know what he was thinking. He hugged Robber 6 tightly. "You want to throw me down and run? No way." While Robber 6 and Robber 7 were being smashed by Xiao Xian's tree, a few hundred meters away, 3 silhouettes were hiding on a tree branch, watching the commotion. "That's the Yanjiao? That's crazy, who would use a tree to smash them?" One of them said. "I'm thinking, are Robber 6 and 7 okay? Are they still alive? How pitiful. Why don't you guys go help them?" The first person asked the person next to him. "No, I won't go even if you beat me to death. Even if we go, let's wait until the Yanjiao leave. What if they change their target to us?" Another person pursed his lips. "Besides, Robber 6 and 7 didn't ask for our help. Why should we go? If Robber 6 and 7 die, does that mean we can all move forward?" The person standing on the other side said calmly. His tone was too indifferent, as if the people who were in danger were not from the same tribe as them. Suddenly, after a loud bang, a sharp whistle was heard from the other side. Hearing the whistle, the 3 people who were watching the commotion from the tree changed their expressions. They were really forced into such a situation. One of them muttered. Although they wanted the 2 to die here, they still didn't believe that the 2 would be forced into such a desperate situation. After all, the 2 were ranked higher than the 3 of them. Robbers had their own rules and preferred to act independently. It was rare for them to meet each other, so naturally their relationship wasn't good. There were many situations where they didn't help, and if there were no benefits they wouldn't help easily. Especially those ranked in the top 10 of the tribe, they enjoyed more resources and received more benefits, so they had to have the corresponding strength. Being caught instead of stealing was a humiliation. It was a question of their strength. Therefore, after being caught, most of them would find a way to escape instead of asking others for help. Only when they were forced into a desperate situation would they call for help like this. Because if they called for help with this kind of whistle, it meant a complete failure and they would be demoted. In other words, after Robber 6 and Robber 7 were rescued, their ranking would be lowered. To a robber, this was an extremely shameful thing. On the other side, Robber 6, who was running away, couldn't dodge in time and was hit by a falling branch. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. He was hit by broken branches a few more times, almost burying the 2 of them. Sensing Xiao Xian's approach, Robber 6 and Robber 7 both rolled their tongues and whistled at the same time. Both of them felt bitter. This was the first time they called for help since they became robbers. Robber 6's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked at Robber 7 as if he wanted to bite him to death. "It's all your fault for being such a burden." Xiao Xian stepped on the fallen tree and ran towards Robber 6 and Robber 7. However, before he could reach them, 2 silhouettes rushed over at an extremely fast speed. Xiao Xian reached the place where Robber 6 and Robber 7 were buried. Like water droplets falling into a crack, they flashed under the crisscrossing broken branches of different thickness. When they came out again, each of them was carrying a robber and running away quickly. Xiao Xian couldn't make a move, and he didn't continue chasing. He didn't plan to smash the tree again. The person who saved Robber 6 and Robber 7 just now should be a robber with a higher ranking than Robber 6 and Robber 7. Instead of continuing to chase, Xiao Xian decided to turn back. He still had to guard his prey. There were other robbers around, and guarding against them was the most important thing. As for Robber 6 and Robber 7, they wouldn't have the chance to fight again in a short period of time. They needed to recuperate. When Xiao Xian returned with regret, the 4 Yanjiao tribesmen and the Hui tribesmen formed a defensive circle to protect their prey. However, the Hui tribesmen's faces were a little stiff. They looked at Xiao Xian as if they were looking at a monster. Chapter 557. Where are the 2 robbers? Duo Kong and the other 3 looked at Xiao Xian. They were rescued, Xiao Xian said. The four of them looked regretful. It was such a pity that they couldn't smash the two robbers to death. However, Xiao Xian's actions had enlightened the four of them. They shouldn't compete with the robbers in terms of speed. There was another way to deal with the robbers. Just like how Xiao Xian used a long golden racket to knock Robber 7 unconscious. This time Xiao Xian hugged a tree and smashed it down. If it weren't for the fact that Robber 7 and the others were rescued, he might have smashed the two robbers to death. However, they couldn't ignore their speed. They had to practice it when they got back. Otherwise, the robbers would run out of their attack range before they could even lift the tree. The robbers' advantage was their strange body shape and speed. In terms of physical strength, they were much stronger than the robbers. They should be thinking about how to use their advantage to deal with the robbers. Seeing that Duo Kong and the other three were deep in thought, the faces of the people from the Hui tribe stiffened. Duo Kong and the others looked like they wanted to carry the tree and smash it a few times too. "Be careful, there are still robbers around," Xiao Xian said. "Yes, we know." After what happened just now, everyone knew that they couldn't be distracted. They had to focus on the area they were guarding. They couldn't be distracted by the slightest movement. "Is there any news from the others?" Xiao Xian asked. "No." Gula shook his head. Speaking of this, the people of the Hui tribe let out a long sigh. Even the robbers in Rock Hill City had come out. If the others didn't come out, they might have really fallen into the trap. There was a glimmer of light in the sky. 3 giant mountain eagles flew over following Gu La's whistle. One of them didn't flap its wings as naturally as the other two. It was the eagle that was hit by an arrow. The other two were energized after leaving the green-faced fanged beast's territory. The people of the Hui tribe decided to ride the 2 eagles over to take a look. The 2 giant mountain eagles weren't happy. It wasn't easy for them to get out of that place. Why did they have to go back? When they thought of the uncomfortable environment over there, they felt like throwing up the meat they had eaten early in the morning. Although they were unwilling, since the people of the Hui tribe insisted, they did as they were told. Xiao Xian couldn't help but think of Cha Cha when he saw Gula summon the giant mountain eagle named Shan Dao. He didn't know how that guy was doing, but he couldn't go to Eagle Mountain to find him. About 2 hours later, the sun had already risen, and the temperature in the woods had obviously risen. When all the water vapor in the night had evaporated, the 2 giant mountain eagles reappeared. But this time they brought back a few people. They were all seriously injured people from the other tribes. Some of them had lost an arm, and their wounds were still bleeding as if they had been blown open. Seeing that the people of the Hui tribe were too busy, Xiao Xian and the others also went over to help. They took out some of the herbs they brought and applied them on the wounds. "The others will arrive soon." Gula sighed. He couldn't help but feel lucky that they chose to leave with the Yanjiao yesterday. Otherwise, they would be in the same situation as these people. After another hour, the sun was scorching the earth. Xiao Xian and the others were resting under the shade of a tree when they heard the commotion. Everyone's expression was very bad. More than half of them were dead or injured. It would be strange if they were happy. Xiao Xian had told them some of the characteristics of the green-faced fanged beast's attacks. They were prepared to avoid a worse situation. But when the slaves led the beasts over, their skills were limited. The green-faced fanged beasts were filled with a violent and crazy aura. They didn't care about anything else and only knew how to attack. They were like unscrupulous hurricanes, destroying everything in their path, especially living things. They also regretted not leaving with the Yanjiao and the Hui tribe when they heard the whistle. But they were really shocked by the news. They only wanted to catch a few more green-faced fanged beasts. They thought that if they caught one more they would have enough time to retreat. But the beasts didn't give them enough time. Who was to blame for this result? Blame the Yanjiao for not telling them everything in advance? So much so that when they found out the truth, they couldn't bear to let go of the benefits in front of them? Thinking back to when they were in the desert, they excluded the 3 people from Yanjiao. Later, when they noticed the changes in the desert, they left the 3 people from Yanjiao alone. Now, they still hoped that Yanjiao would consider everything for them? How was that possible? Who didn't have emotions? Not to mention the grumpy and unreasonable Yanjiao people? They weren't close partners, so the trust between them was too low. They were all on guard, so naturally they wouldn't tell each other any secrets. From another perspective, they probably wouldn't even lead the way into the forest. Duo Kong laid there without moving. He rolled his eyes at the people who came over and continued to guard their tribe's prey. Xiao Xian also found that the people from the 5 tribes who came back all caught 2 or 3 green-faced fanged beasts. The 8 Limbs tribe caught the most with 3. The other tribes only caught 2. The beasts that were tied up were all unconscious. These tribes always had their own ways to keep them unconscious. Hey Muyu, didn't you guys catch 3 of them earlier? Why are there only 2 left now? And Shogu, didn't you catch 4? Why are there only 3 left? Hishi of the Hui tribe asked. Hishi's confusion made the people who came over look even worse. It was Chu Su of the Mang tribe who explained. Don't mention it. When we came over we met the robbers. If we didn't gather together, more would have been robbed. They finally got rid of the green-faced fanged beasts and left that place. The beasts didn't chase after them. Just as they relaxed, the robbers attacked. You guys also met the robbers. Gula was surprised. Also? Chu Su caught the word, you guys met the robbers? The people from the other tribes who just arrived looked at the Yanjiao and Hui tribes. There were 9 unconscious green-faced fanged beasts lying there. 9. There were only 2 tribes. Why didn't the robbers steal more beasts? Some people felt it was unfair and were very jealous. Hishi didn't care about the people's expressions and told them what happened before dawn with a little emotion. The people from the other tribes listened and the muscles on their faces kept twitching. No wonder I felt it was so quiet here. So this was the reason, Chu Su said. The birds and beasts in the forest were all scared away, so it was good for them to rest. Whether they were satisfied with the result or regretted it, it was all in the past. They wouldn't set foot in the green-faced fanged beasts' territory now. The beasts were probably still in a frenzy and birds kept flying over there. After resting for a day and recovering their strength, the people from the other tribes were very quiet. Some people were thick-skinned and asked Xiao Xian and the others if the green-faced fanged beasts really had anything to do with gold. In this regard, Xiao Xian and the others all answered with yes, ah, oh, and so on. They didn't say much. The people who asked felt it was boring and didn't ask any more. The next day the group set off again and embarked on the return journey. However, the people who returned had different moods. The happiest were probably the people from Yanjiao. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.